Good morning. Let's call the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners meeting to order on September 4th, 2024. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll begin our morning with citizen input. Carl Shoemaker.
Good morning, I'm Carl Shoemaker. I live in Bend, Oregon. Patrick Sheehan of Central Oregon Representative Payees has so screwed up my finances that I don't know if I'll have my home next year. He failed to pay the full amount of my property taxes last April, and I had to pay $50 off my debit card on the spot upstairs on the second floor of this building to keep from paying interest on Patrick's failure to pay my property taxes in full. My phone service is now cut off because he failed to pay last month when he told me he would. Several times I have had to pay $25 fees because of overdrafts that by bank because of his mismanagement of my funds. The attitude I have gotten from the Veterans Clinic on Courtney Drive here in Bend, Oregon is, it's not my job description. In summary, Patrick Sheehan of Central Oregon Representative Payees is not on the side of veterans. Thank you.
Carl, would you please go over to our veterans office right here across the street? Go over there, tell them this story, and I am sure that someone in that office will definitely work to help you. I'm really sorry to hear this. And I sincerely mean it. Let me know if you need some more help, but this isn't the way we treat our veterans. Sean is the new executive director. Please ask for him. You can tell him that I sent you. Is there anyone else in the room that cares to speak in public input, citizen input? Do we have any raised hands online? Doreen, would you care to join us, please?
Good morning, Commissioners. I sent you an email earlier this week to the address to the county. I also want to say your abdication of duty to protect citizens of this county from literal tons of ultrafine aviation-led, heart-stopping noise, harassment, and terrifying acts of terror from flight schools and airport tenants, which undeniably lose our community more money than they bring in. And you push the narrative that is good for our community, and you're proud of it, especially days after a plane crashed into townhomes, killing people in Troutdale, and another plane crashed here. With small farms across our country being taken en masse and triple the national average here? With elections being manipulated and the government being weaponized against American citizens, with agencies being in full capture by industry that you all too eagerly welcome to our community and give farmland after farmland and exception after exception to. With autoimmune diseases and chronic health issues from pollutants, pharma, and lab-modified foods that are destroying American viability and children's health for life. With the average IQ and life expectancy of Americans reducing, undeniably tied to heavy doses of heavy metals, biocides, and lab-created foods. With open borders and Americans being the #1 consumers of trafficking victims worldwide, with hundreds of thousands of sex trafficking victims, way too many of them being children in our country, with suicide and drug overdoses being a leading cause of death for children, all while we have a wide open border welcoming inmates, military-age men, and flight students with open visas from hostile countries. As you turn a blind eye to mercenary behaviors designed to chase and poison people from their homes and farms, else die under the pollution of acts of terror. As you make one exception after another, chipping away at our Constitution and protections for healthy crops, clean air, clean water, small farms, and a livable community free from the tyranny destroying our country, you, Deschutes County Commissioners, are on the wrong side of history.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else with a raised hand today? Okay, thank you, Stephen. All right, let's now go to our consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda. Second.
Is there any further discussion?
I'd just say I'm really excited to see this CDC grant for drug-free communities being offered to the county, and I really appreciate the synergy that it creates with our Healthy Schools program.
Okay, then calling for the vote, Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So let's now go to item number 3. Jessica, do you want to join us?
For Caroline and Bethany.
Oh, well, I'm
Okay.
seeing Jessica way back there. Sorry, Caroline, Bethany.
Good morning, Board of County Commissioners and those who are watching. The suicide prevention team and prevention health promotion team under public health with Deschutes County Health Services. Thanks you all for creating time in your agenda to have us here today. We're going to speak just a little bit to some local data around what we do know as far as the scope of the issue of suicide in our county, as well as we'll speak to some important resources to save in your phones, and also some events that we'll be doing in the county over the course of this month. My name is Caroline Suter. My title is Mental Health Promotion Strategist. I work in the suicide prevention program under public health of Deschutes County Health Services.
Yeah. Hi, and my name is Bethany Kushel, and my title is Deschutes County Suicide Prevention Program Coordinator, and I work alongside Caroline.
Yeah. And Jessica Jacks is here as well. She's our supervisor. So thank you all for having us here today. So just a brief overview of our suicide prevention program. Each one of these bubbles are key components to our program. And if you notice, the bubbles are interconnected. They have connections and overlap each other. And this is mainly so that we can leverage our resources to make them go as far as our capacity allows. So each one of these are connected with one another, and it helps us do one of our key goals in our program, which is to prevent suicide in our community. And it really helps us with our strategic efforts to do so in our county. So some examples of what we do in our program, we have that postvention bubble up there at the top. Oregon is the first state in the nation that has suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention legislation. So we have legislative mandates to respond when there is a suicide death in our community. And the purpose of that is to lower community risk and prevent further suicides. Another example is that technical assistance bubble at the bottom left. Just to carry on with the legislation, we have Senate Bill 52 in our state, which mandates our K through 12 school district to have a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention plan. So our program supports our school districts across our county to be in compliance with legislation like that. And then training is another example of what we do. We provide evidence-based suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention training to our systems in our community, because suicide is everyone's business, and we can work together as a community to help lower our rates. So an example is this past June, we did a 2-day suicide prevention and intervention skills training for veterans. So there's veterans there, military service members, their families, and those who serve that population. So that's just one example of what we do. We're about to hop in briefly on some data, local data in our county, and each slide will have a resource. We encourage anyone who is watching or participating today to take out your phone and save these resources, because we never know when we might come across someone in our community who is struggling with their mental health, and we can share out these resources. So in Deschutes County, what we do know is that historically, roughly 3 people die by suicide each month, and this is across the whole lifespan. This is coming from our most recent suicide data trend report for Deschutes County, which spans across the years of 2000 to 2020. So with that, there are 2 resources we're going to highlight. One is that there are 2 crisis lifelines. One is our Deschutes County 24-hour crisis line, which is 322-7500, extension 9. We have our mental health professionals with Deschutes County Behavioral Health answering that line during business hours. And after business hours, we have 988 that answers those phone calls. 988 is our National Suicide Crisis Lifeline, and it's available free and confidential to people who may need support, emotional support or crisis.
So Carolyn, my question to you then is, what if they call this 541 number? Is it going to transfer to the 988 automatically then?
As after hours.
Okay, it will. Okay, I just want to be sure of that because someone in a crisis doesn't need to worry about the details.
Yeah, and 988 you can call or text as well. And calling 988, if you're a veteran, you can dial 1 after you dial 988, 2 for Spanish speaking, and 3 for LGBTQ plus folks. Youth in Deschutes County, what we do know, this is also coming from that same data trend report from years 2000 to 2020. We know that 58% of all Deschutes County deaths among 10 to 17-year-olds were suicide, which is higher than the state and the nation. And in the last decade of that trend report, suicide is the leading cause of death for ages 10 to 17-year-olds in Deschutes County. We have looked at some of our last few years of validated data and combined it with some preliminary data to see if we're seeing different trends. And what we are seeing is it appears that we're having a downward trend of youth suicides for 17 and under, whereas 18 to 24-year-old age bracket appears that it might be increasing. So some things to do there with our youth population and young adults.
So are you talking about the years after 2020?
We look at 2020 through 2022, which are validated years, and combine it with 23 up into current, which is preliminary data. We're seeing a downward trend.
For the 10 to 17? Thank you.
And so youth-based resource is Youthline. Youthline is manned by mental health adult professionals, but also trained teens. A teen can dial 877-968-8491 or text teen to 839-863. Youth who are trained answer the phone calls and text line from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And outside of those hours are trained adults who man the call and text line. Last but not least for data is lethal means in Deschutes County. Evidence-based research in our nation shows that reducing access to lethal means is a vital suicide prevention intervention. When we look over the past 3 years for this data point, that's carrying some preliminary data. So looking at years 2020 to 2023, we're seeing 61% of all Central Oregon suicide deaths of youth ages 24 and under were by firearm. So we are higher in Central Oregon and Deschutes County when it comes to suicide by firearm when we compare it to the state and the nation. There's tangible things we can do to help lower our rates. And a new resource that we have in our Central Oregon area is the safefirearmstorage.com website. This is a regional project to help educate, increase awareness, and increase resources for our community members to securely store their firearms. So there's a variety of different resources on that website. It's in English and in Spanish. So it's a great new resource for our community members. So just as an overview, suicide is a complex public health issue. There's not one contributing factor as to why someone struggles with suicide. And it's a public health issue that doesn't discriminate. It touches many people's lives. And so with that in mind, we want to be able to recognize that there are tangible things that we can do. Suicide prevention is everyone's business. So being vigilant, knowing the warning signs, knowing how to intervene can really help lower our rates because one death by suicide is one too many. So our last resource we want to highlight is our Crisis Stabilization Center that we have here locally. It's located at 63311 Northeast Jameson Street in Bend. It's open 24/7 for those who might be
Did
struggling with a mental health.
did this flyer miss the Northeast, Jamison? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, it's Northeast Jameson.
Okay. All right. Thank you for putting that in there. That helps when you're,
Yes.
yeah, trying to find something.
Yes. Okay, passing it over to Beth.
Yes, thank you. So this month, September being National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, we have a variety of events going on in the community to help promote resources and also hope and healing. So we would just like to take a moment to highlight those. The first one is the American Walk Out of Darkness for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And that will be taking place this Saturday, September 7th at Alpenglow Park. Registration starts at 11 a.m. and the walk starts at 11:45. This is just a beautiful event to go to. There's all sorts of resources, community partners, local businesses, all that are engaged and passionate about suicide prevention. And so we all get together to walk to prevent suicide.
How long will you be walking?
Oh, great question. I think a little less than half a mile. It's just a nice loop through Alpenglow Park. It's all paved.
So you just walk for that half a mile? Oh, okay. It's not like for an hour or something like that.
Walkathon.
I know the Mothers Against Drunk Driving had it there and it was, yeah, it was more than one loop.
This one is just for, it's not a walkathon. It's just to gather community and get to be together. Yeah, great. Thank you. Another beautiful event that we're having will take place on Thursday, September 12th. Takes place at the Ben Lapine Schools Ed Center in downtown on the front lawn, and that is a candlelight vigil to honor those we have lost to suicide. So this event is an opportunity to gather, to be together, to listen to speakers, to listen to some mental health support about grief, and then resources that we can access as loss survivors, as those are different than resources for suicide prevention. And then at sunset, so right around 7:30, we all take a moment of silence and have that candlelight vigil. There will also be a community counseling on access to lethal means presentation that will take place at the East Side Deschutes Library on Tuesday, September 17th at 5:30 p.m. This event is, well, research shows that creating time and distance between someone who is thinking about suicide and their lethal mean is a very effective suicide prevention effort. So this presentation is just to provide education, awareness, and resources on how we can create that time and distance for someone and their lethal mean. Oh, did I go too far? Okay. And then finally on Friday, September 27th, we are having our Esperanza, Ayuda, and Sanción event. This event will be fully in Spanish and it will be offered hybrid across the Central Oregon region. But we have partnered with the Latino Community Association and Bracias, as well as our school districts, to provide this mental health event about community, connection, and identity in Spanish. And then information will all be on the website and all sorts of ways that we can send that out as well. So yeah, that wraps up the majority of the events that we will be hosting this month. And we just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for having us today to talk about this important topic, but also take a moment to thank our COSPA outreach members. These events are put on and supported by our Central Oregon Suicide Prevention Alliance volunteers that consists primarily of suicide loss survivors and attempt survivors. So getting to work alongside them to bring these events is such an honor. So again, thank you so much for having us and
Great.
for honoring this month.
Thank you so much for being here. And hopefully some of the trends you're seeing are going to keep improving and other ones will turn around. Do we want to read the proclamation now?
Sure.
Commissioner DeBonne, do you want to read the first three whereases, and Commissioner Chang, if you want to read the rest of the page, and then I'll read the backside.
All right. Before the Board of Commissioners of Deschutes County, Oregon, proclamation recognizing September, excuse me, as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas in the United States, one person dies by suicide every 11 minutes, with over 49,000 deaths every year in our country. Whereas the Deschutes County, approximately 3 people dies by suicide each month. In Oregon, for youths age 5 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death. Each person's death by suicide affects at least 135 other people, which translates to at least 50% of the U.S. population has known someone who has lost their life to suicide. Friends and family members are forever changed by this loss. Whereas in Deschutes County, roughly 50% or 58% of all suicide deaths are by firearm. For youth, 65% of the suicide deaths of those aged 10 to 17 is by firearm. Both of these trends are higher than the state and national averages.
Whereas many, whereas many of the people who have died by suicide never received effective behavioral health services for many reasons, including the stigma of using behavioral health treatment and the stigma associated with losing a loved one to suicide. Whereas far too many Deschutes County residents die by suicide each year. Whereas Deschutes County is dedicated to partnering with local behavioral health and healthcare organizations, state and local agencies, military and veterans organizations, educational institutions, and the community at large to reduce the frequency of suicide attempts and deaths, and the pain for those affected by suicide deaths through 1, recognizing suicide as a significant public health issue in Deschutes County and declaring suicide prevention a countywide priority. 2, supporting accessible behavioral health services for all areas in our county.
3, helping to destigmatize help-seeking behaviors. Number 4, acknowledging that everyone plays a role in helping to prevent suicide. And number 5, encouraging initiatives known to be effective at preventing suicide attempts and death. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners do hereby designate the month of September 2024 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Deschutes County, and urge Deschutes County residents to learn how they can help, because suicide prevention is everyone's business. Dated this 4th day of September by the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners 2024. Could we have a motion for the proclamation?
I'll move approval of the proclamation for Suicide Prevention Awareness Month.
And I will second it.
Are there any further comments?
Just one is too many. You know, that's what jumped right out at me in these slides. One is too many.
And I do believe our veterans number has really increased dramatically. So all that we can do, I think Carl's gone now, but you know, I'm really hoping he'll go over to our veterans office, and the personal care that they can give him will hopefully make his life a bit easier. Right now, it sounds like he's really needing some tremendous help. So that's good to know.
And Caroline and Bethany, thank you so much for the roles that you play in helping to coordinate this whole network of people and support this network of people who are engaged in awareness and prevention. You know, I really appreciate the focus on lethal means and trying to create some time and distance between people and people with suicidal ideation and lethal means. And I'm also really proud of the role that the county plays, being there for people in crisis that might help to prevent some of these deaths by suicide.
Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thank you.
So much. Great.
And let's hope next year when we have you come back, the numbers will have improved. So everyone think about what people say, read between the lines, and see if we can help more people. One life is too many. item number 4, please.
Is this a photo opportunity time? Is that what was coming? You want to do that?
Sure, why not?
Let's do that.
Where's Eric?
I can just see. Him ready.
Oh, yes, it's in there now. Hey, we have item number 4.
Chair, I'll lead this item to begin with and certainly include other county staff as they wish to come up or participate. We wanted to schedule some time on your agenda this morning to prepare for tomorrow's joint meeting with the Bend City Council. There are 4 agenda topics, substantive agenda topics, and if you just for a reminder, I know we would have one of these meetings likely on a Monday before a Thursday meeting, but since yesterday, this past Monday was a holiday, we're just scheduling this morning. The 4 main topics are growth management, both in the city and the county. That's item number 2 on the agenda. 3 is to discuss homelessness strategies and outcomes specifically related to North Juniper Ridge, and that'll be the focus of our discussion and topic this morning. And the last couple on solid waste. And Tim Brownell, our solid waste director, is prepared for the agenda that those 2 items may be squeezed at the end based on the time discussing the first couple of items. So he's well prepared for adjusting his presentation as needed. So if we dive into agenda topic number 3 just a bit, and
So Nick, just logistics. So this meeting's tomorrow at 2:00 in this room.
correct.
And we'll set up kind of a big round table for us all to be on the floor here with microphones and video.
Correct. In fact,
Just the
Brenda
logistics.
and I we're coordinating on exactly the setup for the room just before this. So we'll probably do the full circle, just given the number of people that are participating, and then we'll have the back of the room open so that there's plenty of room for the public and others to attend. Exactly.
And it is from 2 to 4.
From 2 to 4, correct. Thank you. So we plan to kick it off with Eric King, Bend City Manager, and I, and he's in the audience today. Thank you for being here. With a summary of some of the actions that we're working on, each jurisdiction is working on now. And I'm going to pass along a couple of slides that we are planning to present just on behalf of the county. The city will have theirs, and it's really going to be pages 2 and 3 of what I'm passing out to you here of what some of the topics are. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the topics that we highlight and share, and certainly, and these are just projects we've been involved in over the past couple of years, from safe parking, the Juniper Ridge basic hygiene stations being potable water, the porta potties, the trash receptacles, the hand washing stations, DSL land exchange, Oasis Village, the lease with Mountain View, the new workforce home ownership program, additional money for the Red Mesa parking program, and then additional funding to Veterans Village. Those are some of the things that I will highlight quickly. There's a lot more, of course, that we're involved in, from the Simpson Avenue project and Lapine land donation to Habitat. There's a whole series of additional topics we could highlight, but we were going to focus on those on these. But certainly welcome your feedback on any of these topics, or to add additional highlights for us to share at tomorrow's joint meeting.
So, maybe a few words about Veterans Village and its status, because that's kind of our premier facility for this purpose. A lot of community engagement in getting it built, and just a couple words about the status. That's all.
It is up to 22. We might want to add that there are 15 original cabins and adding 7 new ones. I don't know if I'd even call them tiny homes because they do come with half baths. So they're incredibly significant. And I believe the number of veterans that have graduated is in the neighborhood of 35. So an incredibly successful program. Thank you to COVA. They should be acknowledged for operating that facility.
So yeah, as I say, just acknowledging if all cabins are online, the 7 new ones, and then the numbers, just like you mentioned, Commissioner. But
And then the good news is the greenhouse. Hopefully the greenhouse is going to get built. Kind of got through some stories last week on it. Thank you, Eric King, for participating in that. And it would really be lovely if that greenhouse could be built for those veterans. Just a really positive addition to that community.
Nick, if we're going to have this one bullet about the workforce home program, I think there's a whole lot of affordable and workforce housing efforts that the county's supported and been involved in that we would also want to mention there. And I like the kind of connection to housing. Oftentimes we talk about homeless shelter and transitional housing really separately from affordable housing and workforce housing, but it really is a continuum to think about, and so good to mention housing, but there's just a wide range of things that we're involved in that are closer on the continuum to shelter and transitional housing than the this missing middle program.
Are we referring to Rooted Homes and Habitat?
All the ARPA investments we've made, discounted land sales, land contributions. There's a very large number of them.
Okay, we'll expand the.
And I wouldn't we don't need a bullet for every single one of those, but just kind of an emphasis on a lot of housing efforts.
Maybe on the line that says additional 200,000 Mountain View Community Safe Parking Program, just to clarify exactly where it's going.
Thank you. I expect the majority of the discussion will then be to focus on where do we go next in terms of addressing homelessness at Juniper Ridge. And I should clarify in the staff report, which we prepared very quickly based on board direction last week as we were meeting the deadline to submit our agenda packet. We only identified the properties that are zoned exclusive farm use, and there are properties that are zoned open space and conservation in the area. The OS&C zone, and Peter's here and he can help us with any details of that, not to expect you to be the expert on all matters of it right now, but OS&C is an interesting zone. It's not a resource zone like farm and forest, but it's also not an exception zone like rural residential 10 or multiple use agricultural 10. So that is another zoning designation at North Juniper Ridge. And I expect there'll be a lot of discussion on what is possible or not possible at North Juniper Ridge. And that's going to be a big topic of discussion. I don't know if the board wants to have any of those discussions now based on kind of where we're at, or we want to wait until tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure you had time to consider any options today before engaging in the discussion with the Bend City Council tomorrow. And if so, Peter Gutowski, our Community Development Director, County Legal Counsel, Dave Doyle's here. Eric Kropp is here, Deputy County Administrator, who's also instrumental in helping with all matters to address houselessness in Deschutes County. So, Commissioners, I'll turn it over to you for any questions or discussion you wish to have at this time.
Well, I think we've had the warnings. I know, what was it, through the 12th of August, we had 8 fires within Bend. 8 fires, I believe, were started by transients. I know on Sunday, I believe it was, there was an RV fire out of Sisters. Fortunately, that they got out immediately. The wind it wasn't blowing crazy like it was on Monday. So they did get that fire out really rapidly, but we've had a lot of warnings. We have a community that's on pins and needles, and I'm it's really appropriate that we are meeting tomorrow with the city of Bend. So I'm looking forward to that meeting. The fact that we need to go forward with somewhat of a temporary managed camp that's actually going to protect the people in it and our citizens outside.
On the subject of North Juniper Ridge, I would love to see us defer how we will navigate any legal concerns, considerations, land use law considerations till tomorrow, but it would be helpful for me to just understand the contours of what we're talking about. So I would be interested to hear from county legal counsel kind of what they think the key concerns or considerations are related to doing managed camp, outdoor shelter, or other things at North Juniper Ridge.
Okay, Mr. Doyle is approaching the bench.
And again, I just want to kind of know the lay of the land today, and then I would hope that we could defer discussion of how we navigate through those legal issues till tomorrow.
Sure, Commissioners, Dave Doyle, County Attorney. Our position's been the same. My position's been the same since I started doing land use in Oregon in 1994, and that is you can't site a homeless facility on resource-owned land, period. Now, the open space and conservation parcels, I think Nick indicated those are not resource lands, but they're also not exception lands. So I don't know if you can put a homeless facility there or not. There's certainly no case law to give us any guidance. And House Bill 2006 wasn't the best written piece of legislation. So you can kind of glean a lot of impressions from that one way or the other. So I don't know if you can cite one there or not. I can certainly tell you, I can't say as a matter of black letter law, you can. Equally, I don't know that I could say you can't. But I can for resource zone lands. You can't cite a homeless facility there. It's not allowed. 215, 283 is sort of the holy grail, and it's not allowed. You can't get there from here on resource zone lands. Can you do a rezone, get it to an exception, an RR10, an MUA 10? Possibly. But again, you're going to have opposition, maybe not from the Land Watch or DLCD or the governor, but you're certainly going to have it from adjacent property owners. You've seen that with the Fort Thompson situation already, where folks are, and that's not even being identified as a homeless facility. It's being identified as a camping and trails location. And you've seen the pushback you've gotten from the community on that. So I think certainly if the county or the city or whomever owns some land out in that area that's zoned open space and conservation, if they were to try to get approval to site some sort of homeless facility out there, I would expect there would be a legal challenge from a neighbor. I would be surprised if there wasn't, especially in light of the Fort Thompson pushback that we've seen on that concept. And so, we'll see where that goes. I mean, you're familiar with the LUBA Court of Appeals process and the time involved with that. You're familiar with 710 and some of the other rezone zone change applications that you've had in the history on some of those. And so, I mean, that's probably the procedural obstacles and process or timelines that you'd be dealing with would be our best guess, was that there would be a challenge and the applicant would have to establish that that's an allowable use out there. And I don't know if we're talking about an actual full homeless facility, something akin to Juniper Ridge, Dirt World, but with more amenities. I don't know if we're just talking about people camping in cars. I think that could be a distinction in the open space and conservation zone lands. And there's some acreage out there. I'm not sure who the ownership is on all that. I do believe the county has a parcel that's zoned like that. There may be other owners out there as well. I don't know if the city has any land that's in that zoning designation or not. I haven't looked at it that closely. Peter might know better.
I'm actually, I don't have a good enough sense of detail to know which lands are OS and C zoned and which lands are EFU zoned. I can,
Yeah, I don't know. Again, Peter might have a better idea and be able to give you a little better description, but I do know there is a parcel or two out there that has that zoning.
So Peter, I've been out there a lot. There's like 50 acres that we drive around that we know we have like 14 camps on. Is it within those 50 acres that the county owns, or is it somewhere else?
Great question. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. Where Dirt World is, what Juniper Ridge North, what's called Dirt World. This is east of Highway 97. Before you get to the canal, I think COID has a canal there that runs north. That's zoned open space and conservation. And so there's about 140 acres there. Now, some of that open space and conservation transects Highway 97 and goes west. You get closer to the canal, you get out of open space and conservation property that's owned by Deschutes County, then you get into the city of Bend's own property, which is zoned exclusive farm use. And I think the homeless are not only on the open space and conservation zone property today, they're also on the city owned property that is zoned EFU. The rest of the EFU zone property that the county owns is what I'll call imperfectly the kind of the Fort Thompson reach. The board has talked under other items about a structured campground, but that is located west of Highway 97. So Deschutes County doesn't own any EFU zone property in this vicinity that's east of Highway 97. So to Dave's point, certainly the Community Development Department, just to kind of echo the caution that we communicate for land use opportunities on resource zone property. It's exclusive farm use zone property and forest zone land. 215, 283 and Brentmar, which is a predominant case. It just makes it really difficult to establish new uses outside of that statutory framework. We've seen over the years an attempt by developers, sometimes by Deschutes County, to push and kind of mold or make the land use system more malleable. It's really difficult to do that in resource zone property. Cities have far more flexibility. And obviously, once you get outside of resource zone areas, as Dave pointed out, there may be possibilities in the open space and conservation zone as it pertains possibly to safe parking. Section 6 of House Bill 2006 speaks to safe parking outside urban growth boundaries. And leaves open the possibility, I think, to establish such a use. But if you're looking at emergency shelters, something more akin to an encampment where people aren't relying solely on their vehicles for shelter, it's going to get much more complicated. So I supplement Dave's remarks. Just the Community Development Department communicates these messages regularly to property owners and investors, as they look for farm dwellings, non-farm dwellings, resort opportunities on resource zone properties, water ski lakes. It's just complicated. And when you have ambiguity, it leads to matters of first impression. And what we've seen over the years is it's really difficult to, on your first attempt, it doesn't mean that the courts won't frame an issue on remand to allow local governments or developers for that matter, to try to address their respective shortcomings. But this has all the makings on resource zone property to be quite complicated.
okay, so if I'm tracking correctly, east of Highway 97, the county, that 50 acres of county land, that is OS&C zoned, and then some of the city land that is between the rail tracks and Highway 97, that's EFU zoned.
Correct.
One of the other questions I want to ask about this is, I'm trying to differentiate between the county's role as a property owner, as a landowner, and the county's role as a land use authority. And trying to understand which hat we would potentially get in trouble wearing in, if there was an effort to move forward with, some kind of managed camp, transitional housing facility, shelter. Could you speak to that a little bit, Dave? I mean, is it, or either one of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So great question.
I mean, as a landowner, we would be the applicant.
You would be the applicant, correct. So Christy Bollinger, who's the director for property management, would lead that effort. There's a separation. The Community Development Department, of course, is the regulatory agency that administers the state's land use program through our local zoning program. So we would be the one who would communicate the vulnerabilities, a process, to the extent that, there was a desire to get maybe, an administrative determination, a plan amendment, zone change. If there was we would be expressing concerns if there was a willingness and, to try to creatively interpret House Bill 2006 in a way that somehow the legal thesis being that waived all land use, we would just be communicating that has real vulnerability in that, that someone can always, if one thinks that there's a ministerial decision where, in this case, House Bill 2006, if there were arguments that this was a law that has waived all land use zonings, that still doesn't mean that counties, in this case, as a property owner, wouldn't be vulnerable to a legal challenge. Someone could take that action, whether it's articulated in an intergovernmental agreement or a memorandum of understanding or investments that are being put on the property. Someone could appeal that directly to the Land Use Board of Appeals and say Deschutes County is making an interpretation. And then the courts would rule, on House Bill 2006 and determine if that was something that was truly waiving zoning or not, if the county was exercising discretion. So we wear those hats where we would want to communicate where we think there's a process and the vulnerability that comes with a process. And to the extent that there was this willingness to kind of push House Bill 2006 creatively, well-intentionally, we would still communicate the vulnerability that would come with those actions. Because as Dave noted, I think the likelihood of the community just accepting this type of use in this location in Deschutes County, where, sometimes people are appealing a pole barn, and to assume that an encampment or any variation of a shelter, safe parking is not going to get challenged, I think is naive, just given the level of investment and sophistication that this region now represents in the community. So that's the Community Development Department's role. Legal I don't want to speak for legal, but we coordinate with Dave's team to ensure that we're communicating appropriately and, of course, professionally, so that at the end of the day, whether it's the property management or it's a private developer, that they're making informed decisions. We just facilitate a process. We're certainly not the adjudicators or in any position to say something dispositively can be resolved through a particular action. It just doesn't work that way.
It's fascinating. In 2019, I was out in Dirt World, and all I saw all over the place were pallet houses. And if you or I would have done that kind of a structure on our property, I'm sure code would have been over us. We still might be fighting that battle, but there were tons of pallet houses. The other day when I was out in East Antler, I saw someone with a garden. They were on the backside of that property that we've been trying to do, 20-year exchange. They had a garden. They had corn 5 feet tall. I'm like, what did they do? Drill a well out there? Unbelievable that this has gone on so long. And I'm wondering if the state, actually the land that we want next, the south end to the fairgrounds, are there homeless on the state's land? That they won't take our land because we definitely have people on it, but are there homeless on that line too? I'm sure there are. So it just seems amazing though. And then there were tires in East Antler. I just remember that it was a different feel. China Hat in 19 had actually more people that were working. Some of the places were neat and tidy. I don't really see that today when I go out there. But then, I'm just saying that this has gone on and gone on and gone on. And now we have fires like almost on a daily basis in this county. And if the wind is blowing and a fire starts, that is not going to be something that we want to happen. So what is it that we do? Because we're in a critical situation and we've got to do something sooner rather than later.
More than a year ago, EDCO had a meeting and the deputy director of Department of State Lands, and the question came up about what about that swap land and the Department of State Lands in the southeast side of Redmond. And they said, oh no, we don't have homeless on our property. We get aggressive, make sure they leave if somebody sets up there. So what does that mean? That means they hand it to us. We've been the receptor for this unsanctioned camping, and we're sandwiched in between the state land use system, the urban growth boundary, the city's, expectation of how they're going to use their land, and the state telling people you will not set up on our Department of State Lands land. So, we're in the squeeze here.
Yes, we are definitely being.
Right. If we could steer back to the topic at hand, where we're trying to figure out what kind of managed camp shelter activities we can partner with the city of Bend on to address some of these concerns, so that we can put people on the pathway of homelessness, so that we can ask people to leave certain areas. I guess I'd ask my fellow commissioners, do you have any other questions about North Juniper Ridge or any other areas in the vicinity of the city of Bend that where we might be able to do some positive things? And do you need to know more before we get into the discussion tomorrow with the city?
I'd like to try to, this is kind of like a work session item for us in preparation for tomorrow. I would like to take it as far as we can today about the clarity. What would we be bringing to the meeting tomorrow? It's not a lot of value in leaving everybody up in the air about, well, I don't know what the county's going to do. So open space and conservation zoning, that just makes my mind hurt that we would think that is a better use than the resource land that's never been farmed for profit, never had agricultural water. And we've been in this situation many times. So I would lean towards selecting X amount of acres and part of the resource land outside the city where people are already unsanctioned camping. And, because we have an open code enforcement case on ourselves already, to work towards, mitigation of that situation in a defined area. So I'm just trying to put a little direction to this.
In a small defined area.
Yeah, if I can I was going to elaborate on that point just for a moment with the code enforcement case. Right now, the resources we're providing are in an attempt to address the case. And there are the topics that are scheduled for tomorrow, the surge of services, the management strategy, the possible strategies. Those can all be toward mitigating, addressing, resolving the code enforcement case. The question is how far, where is the line drawn between addressing the code enforcement case and then establishing something new or creating something new, which is where I think Commissioner Chang's question was also going, that legal counsel's clearly stated in coordination with community development and administration regarding the use of other rural lands outside of the UGB. So there's a line there someplace at which we're moving beyond resolving the code enforcement case and establishing something new. And it's probably
we've gotten
line.
Very specific feedback from the governor's office saying that they're not authorizing, utilization of resource land outside the cities. We're in the same situation with the Gales property. It's mentioned many times, but that's exactly the same situation. It's resource land outside the city. As to say DLCD, they don't want to open up anything for
negotiation because the state land use system's kind of, sharpened to such a point that if anything moves, a lot of people are going to want to have a lot of things move possibly. So that puts us in a spot where either we make a clear decision saying the future state of Juniper Ridge in the near future will be, removing people, following state law and land use law to the letter of the law, or utilizing some of that land outside the guidance of legal and the state land use system temporarily to start to say, okay, this is a place you can be. Remember, this is right where we were at a couple years ago. You can't be here, but here's somewhere else you can be. And we've just not even been able to get to that yet. And a lot of resources have been provided, a lot of, the safe parking, the facilities inside the cities, the investments at Bethlehem Inn, Shepherd's House, all that's wonderful. But we're still in a spot where we're not kind of turning the corner on unsanctioned dispersed camping in the rural. And, China Hat's in the same spot. Obviously, that's federal land. And we talk about surge activities. There may be a partnership here where Forest Service is going to step up and say, okay, let's stabilize people. Let's make the situation better. But it can't be permanent because there's no willingness at the federal level to change the two-week camping rule. So I'm just saying we are in the tight spot.
I mean, I would argue that you said we're not turning the corner. We're not seeing any progress. I would say the declines we saw during the point in time count this January in the Redmond area and the Bend area can be directly attributed to the amount of shelter and transitional housing and pathways out of homelessness that those two communities have established in recent years. And they are sort of like a playbook, if you will, for us to look at and to understand what actually does make a difference in addressing homelessness in our region. So I would say let's take that playbook and figure out where we can create more of these facilities and more of these pathways out of homelessness in the areas that we are interested in. We could spend a lot of time talking about the state land use planning system, or we could actually be spending our time trying to figure out a path forward and solve problems.
The interesting thing though, because Redmond, Bend, we have all done a lot. But actually, when I went down 17th Street coming out of East Antler, I was horrified when I saw how many RVs are still on 17th Street. Medline, an amazing internationally recognized firm operation, is right across the street. They've got cyclone fence with 3 rows of barbed wire on the top. And there are all these RVs that are parked there. And when I was there a couple years ago, helping with the Sunday cleanup, I honestly don't think it looks any better. I was shocked how bad it was. I'm like, we have done all these things, and yet I don't see the problem going away. So clearly the state knows something if they tell people to leave. This is where you need to go. We've got to find a temporary spot where this is where you need to go. And we need to get it done sooner rather than later, because people in our community have had a lot of patience, and now it's really run out. So temporary is, I think, a great path forward. They're not going to like it, but we've got to do something that has security, constant security, people running the program. People need to get help, just like the pilot program in Eugene that's working really well. Surrounding people with help, and those that don't want to come in and get help, they're going to need to move on. So Nick, what can we say? It's a no-win situation, isn't it? But we've got to make it a winning for the community. We've got to figure out a way that temporarily we can actually get Deschutes County in a safer position. Look, Darlene 3, the fire in La Pine. We had way too many fires in the month of August. And that's with giving out smoke detectors, giving people instructions on fires, education, all this. And it's clearly, we're still not there.
Okay, well, let's all be ready to put on our thinking caps and work collaboratively tomorrow and actually figure out some things that we can do.
Great.
Well, so for clarity, I mean, I'd be supportive of doing something to consolidate and offer services outside the city of Bend on county land, the south part of the the county's land at Juniper Ridge area, north of Beechcraft Lane. So that would be, something that's tangible. As I say, the guidance from land use and legal is that that's way out of bounds, but it could be temporary. It could be under emergency orders. It can be in the, full daylight. We're having a public meeting now. We'll have a public meeting tomorrow on this. And, it's just a starting point, but I'm just saying I'd be willing to go there.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments.
I'll be interested in exploring those concepts tomorrow.
Great. And if you have time this evening, I would try and have a conversation with Chuck Hemingway, who is an incredible resource for our county. So thank you, Chuck, for all the work you've done. We need anything more?
Nothing more today on this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. We're now to item number 5.
Yes, Commissioners, this is a public hearing to consider order number 2024-030, approving annexation into Bend Park and Rec District. The 50-acre parcel that's being brought in by the developer, Polish Homes. We submitted the petition through the staff process, the assessor's office, the clerk, and community development have all reviewed and approved the petition as to form. This is the time for a public hearing on that. We have these from time to time. I would suggest that the board open the public hearing, call for any testimony, if any, and then proceed with approval of order number 2024-030.
Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing in consideration of order number 2024-030 regarding Polish Homes annexation into Bend Park and Rec. The public hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the room that cares to testify? Is there anyone online that cares to testify, Stephen? Doreen Tai.
Hey, I don't really have anything to say on it because I haven't looked it over, but I have seen a lot online lately about people in Central Oregon unhappy with Polish Homes' lack of concern for our community. And in light of the tree code appeals they're putting up, one does have to wonder, what is the kickback that Polish is getting for this? Why am I reading it right that they're giving land that's inhabited to Parks and Rec? I don't understand how that's happening. And what is their kickback? What motivates this? Because I don't really believe from what I'm seeing online that they're trying to do our community a bunch of favors. So I sure would like to know more about that and who's benefiting. Thanks.
Thank you, Doreen. Are there any other comments? Stephen? Commissioner Chang, did you want to say something?
I mean, just to be clear, this annexation, it doesn't mean that Polish Homes is donating land to the Park and Rec District. It means that that land is coming into the Park and Rec District boundaries for taxation purposes and services. I mean, you pay taxes in the Park District, you get services from the Park District. You're within the Park District, you're eligible to use you take classes and do other things at resident rates versus people outside of the district rates.
Any other comments? Any other raised hands online, Stephen? Okay, thank you. Do we need to leave this up any longer or may we close it? Is it okay to close it? Okay, like to close the public hearing since we've heard comments from the public. Dave,
That would be the time if you're inclined to proceed to take up order 2024-030. We've drafted it with the assumption that the board would approve the annexation. As I indicated previously, all the various departments that have had to review it have done so and confirmed it. The Bend Park and Rec District is supportive of it. And as Commissioner Chang indicated, this property, which I believe is not too far from Caldera High School, as it develops further, the folks that buy those properties would be within the Park and Rec District, and their taxes would reflect that. But as Commissioner Chang indicated, they would also get the benefit of being in that district, lower prices and things of that nature if they were to use, say, Juniper, or Larkspur, or any of the facilities that the Park and Rec District provides for.
So with that, I'll move approval of order number 2024-030, approving Polish Homes annexation into the Bend Park and Recreation District. The parcels mentioned.
Second.
is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you, Dave. Item number 6, Newberry geothermal project update, please.
There a place to put a drive in here?
What?
You can work with Stephen on that.
Yes.
Drive, he's got a presentation. There it is.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh. So, I was in front of you guys some years ago. We did a rent.
Dave, do you want to introduce yourself for the record, please? Thank you.
David Stowe, I'm with Mazama Energy, who is going to be doing some work up at the Newberry geothermal site. Down slope from Easton Polana Lake up there.
And grab the microphone a little closer also. It's all recorded. So David, we were able to see each other at the Lapine Chamber of Commerce about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the 16th, I think. So there was a presentation to the members of the community who had showed up that morning also.
Yeah. And I just thought it'd be a good idea to let you guys know what's going on. There's trucks rolling up there in the next month or so. And didn't want to have a stealth operation. Thought some advance notice would be a good idea. So let's see.
He's helping in the back too.
There it goes.
There we go. So yeah, this one here just shows. So what we're doing up there is called enhanced geothermal, and specifically super hot rock now, which is kind of a new acronym in the geothermal industry. Last time it was just enhanced geothermal. And so if you look at those intersecting rings up there, they're just, what we have is hot, dry rock, which there's tons of it all over the world. We could run the whole planet on it if we could figure out how to tap it and turn it into energy. And so that's the technical description. That's what we're doing up there, is trying to figure out a more efficient way to fracture that rock. Last time we had this really low pressure technique that we were using. It didn't really create a big enough reservoir. And that's why we quit. We had to figure out a better way to make a better mousetrap up there, to put it again in technical terms. This shows, it's hard to see that from a distance, so I don't know how effective that's going to be. So basically we drill down in, and what we're going to be doing this year is what's called stimulation work. What that means is we apply pressure to the rock. We stimulate existing fractures. We're going to use more pressure this time to try to create a bigger reservoir. That more pressure will actually fracture the rock. But it's not like oil and gas fracking because we're not using fracking chemicals or any of that. Nothing that will pollute the groundwater is going into the wellhead. The concerns last time were really two areas: water pollution, because we're all concerned about water around here, and then induced seismicity, like are we going to make an earthquake? Last time, 2.4 was the highest event. That was, you can't feel that if you're standing right over it. And I can say personally, I was standing right over it when it happened, and I didn't know. And that was right at the site. We're blessed with a lot of solid bedrock here in Central Oregon. So it's not a place that will, where earthquakes will do as much damage because the rock resists the movement. So you don't get as much movement in the ground. The same thing if it happened in Portland would knock a bunch of buildings down. So that's just the geology that we have here. So the largest event was 2.4, which is below the threshold of what you can feel as a human or even an animal for that matter. And our modeling tells us that we're going to have about the same thing this time that we had last time. Let's see. Yeah, this is probably more detail than you need. I think you guys ask me if you have questions. If you want more detail, I can provide it. But we're going to get right down in the weeds pretty fast. The big takeaway from this is it's going to be about the same in terms of what you can tell in the community as what we had last time. There is a couple of background things about this. We have a very advanced, maybe the most advanced microseismic array on the planet up there. 11 seismometers scattered around the caldera up there, and there's a strong motion detector and a seismometer right down to La Pine, because it's the closest community and we want to be able to monitor things. The water testing up there has been ongoing since the last project. I don't remember exactly what the protocol is, but they test it very, very regularly. I want to say weekly, but I might be not right about that, and I can get that information for you if you guys are interested. That's the long and the short of it.
So super hot rock is the next technology that amplifies the energy possibility. I mean, that's the big picture here.
That's exactly right, Tony. It's like 10x, 8 to 10x power. It's all about power density in the energy world. For batteries, it's how much power can you put in X amount of a thing to put in a car to get more miles out of it. So when you're talking about power, it's power density is really what it comes down to. If it's a dam, how much energy can we generate with this dam? And the same thing is true for this. And it comes down to how much energy is in a square kilometer of rock. How many, it's some like millions of barrels equivalent of oil. So there's this huge potential. But you have to have three things to get energy out of hot rock. You have to have the temperature, you have to have a fluid and a way to transfer that heat up to the surface to do something with it. And so the way that happens is you drill down and we create the fracture system is like the radiator in your car. It's a way to transfer energy from the liquid or the rock to the liquid. And when you heat it, then you have to pump it up to the surface, and you have to heat something else with it so you can turn a turbine to generate electricity. You have to make steam, basically. And so this is a really, complicated way to make steam, to turn a power turbine, to make a power plant. So the first thing we have to do is create an efficient reservoir, and that's what we're working on this year. We're mainly increasing pressure and trying some different techniques to get a bigger network so we can flow more water and hopefully have something viable out of it. And then the next step after that would be go from that data. If it's successful, the next step would be to design some kind of a power plant and expand the footprint probably a little bit. Just the steps you have to go from science experiment to practical real world power generation. So that we're kind of at the second part of the first step of that. You know, we're going back from what we did last time, trying a few new things to see if they work, getting a little more aggressive. You know, there was just so much concern in the community that first time around. Not seeing it this time, to be honest with you. But I think generally people are going to be concerned, like the calls you guys most likely would get about, oh, they're drilling up there. What's going on? Are they going to frack? Or, you know, people just get concerned about those things. I don't have to tell you that. But, you know, and I just, you know, I've been reaching out to like chambers of commerce, and now I'm here with you guys and other places that last time were really fired up. And this time it's like, oh yeah, you guys did that already. So that, you know, I'm not seeing that same level of concern. That doesn't mean it won't come out at some point, but, trucks are going to roll, within a month up there to do you have to clean out the well and do what's called a reworking of the well. They're going to add new casing and things like that. And it's, you know, they're big trucks and they say Halliburton on the side. So that always gets people's attention too. So it's, you know, I said, you couldn't have used another company. It would have made our life a lot easier, but that's just the way it goes. And, so that's what's happening. Initially, we were reworking the well and doing some more stimulation work.
Dave, I wanted to dig in a little bit on the other potential area of concern, like groundwater contamination concerns with you. So, using different techniques than the prior time, not using the fracking chemicals that are associated with oil and gas drilling. What are you pumping into the ground?
Mostly water or some kind of, and I can get you a list of the chemicals that are going in. They're published on the permit, but I'm happy to do that because I looked into that pretty hard myself because I know that's where I'm going to get questions that I have to address. Everything has that they're using mostly breaks down into water eventually. So there's no oils, caustic material that would pollute groundwater kind of thing. It's common things that are used for, you know, tracing leaks in wells and things like that. And sand is one of them, and then drilling mud, which is just a specialized mud that they use in the drilling industry. So there's no toxic chemicals at all. And I'm happy to provide you with that list if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see
Okay.
that. And then, you know, after you know, if you're successful in creating this larger reservoir space underground, is it that same liquid that you used for the, you know, for fracturing the rock that's going to be down there, or is it,
Water, and then we drilling mud and some other things, but that's not really what's fracturing the rock. That's honestly, I'm not an expert at drilling. I've tried to learn about it as much as I can, having never drilled anything in my life. It's pretty technical stuff. So I don't know if I have a good answer for you, honestly, Phil. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, these are just like, we don't need an answer right now, but
Yeah.
like maybe
I have
somebody later could, you know,
what can give you all the technical information you want.
that would be great.
Yeah.
And then, so the reservoir that's created through the fracturing, is that contained, like self-contained, or will liquids go out of, you know, leak out of there?
I asked him that question too, because that's water use is in Central Oregon is always top of mind. Is, you know, we have a scarcity of water here. So it's about 1 day's use, 10 million or so gallons ish to create the reservoir. And then there will be some small loss, like 1% loss to the rock. That just means leaks in the rock because there's some natural cracks down in there. If that, you know, that's about as much as I know now specifically. I suppose we won't know until we do it exactly what, you know, how much do we have to put in to maintain the level, you know, how much is leaking out. But they're telling me it's kind of in the range of 1%.
Like per year or
That's my understanding.
per day? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I mean, the one other thing I would say is if you haven't received a lot of public concern yet, I think I had no idea that you that there was going to be additional work out there, and just given the potential energy opportunity associated with this project, I'm excited that you're going to be doing additional work, but if I had no idea that you're going to be doing additional work out there, then probably a lot of other people don't either. And
I
so,
have no idea. I've talked to Lapine. I've reached out to some chambers and there just wasn't a ton of interest.
right.
Last time they couldn't wait for me to talk to them, but I think the fact that we did it once and we didn't have any problems maybe allayed people's fears. We also still don't have a power plant, so there's a little bit of crying chicken or crying what boy that cried wolf. Oh, we're gonna have power. Well, so these many years and we still don't have it. So
Right.
I think people probably be interested when we show them something.
Right. Right. And can you remind me what year it was that these last fracturing tests were done?
It went on from like 2012 to I want to say 2017,
Okay.
something like that. The wells were actually drilled, I think, in 2008.
That's what it says on your chart.
Good. And that's it. There's been a lot of wells drilled up there over the years. There's been, 20 or 30 years of different companies coming up and proposing different things. And
Right.
we've been around for quite a while now, even though we've changed our name. It's Mazama Energy right now. It's owned by all the same people that own Alta Rock. So I really don't have a good answer for that either. Why they had to change the name is kind of beyond me, but, yeah. But I will definitely keep you guys advised as anything happens up there that looks new or, I'll keep you guys in the loop for sure.
Thank you.
I think one
You
of
said
the,
in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks' time, the Halliburton trucks are going to be pulling in.
I think it's going to be more like a month, but yeah.
mentioned maybe $45 to $60 a megawatt, and I think one of the slides previously. So that's 4.5 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. I just think of 7 or 8 cents is our co-op prices, and then 14 and 15, which is $150 a megawatt for some of the investor owned. So it's more than BPA power, but it could be a great base load, long term, fitting in the range power source.
Yeah, and you've hit on it right there, is that it's renewable energy and it's base load. So it's closer to hydro than coal or solar. Coal is base load too, but solar is not. It's intermittent. So it's very attractive and it's virtually pollution free. We're not creating any greenhouse gas. I mean, there's some energy that's consumed in drilling and transporting trucks. So yeah, but as far as generating the energy, it's pretty close to zero, which makes it pretty attractive.
I'd also be really interested to know for an equivalent amount of power generation capacity, how many acres of land of solar panels you would need.
Thousands. And then it's not equivalent. I mean, they do have, what do they call it? Combined.
Right, because it's not base load.
Yeah. Well, they do it with a gas plant or some other kind of a base load thing to offset when the sun goes down so that kicks in.
Right.
Or they have different kinds of schemes for solar out there. I don't know if any of them are actually implemented where you heat all this fluid up with the sun and then it's hot enough to keep generating after the sun goes down. So it kind of moderates that. It doesn't just cut off. There's different schemes out. There's a lot of them actually. I just don't know how many of those are actually commercially viable.
Right.
But there's plenty of articles about it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Okay,
it's
thanks.
definitely, we know, anyone who's talked to Pacific Power or any of our local co-ops recently, there is a need for massive expansion in generation capacity.
Yeah.
And the impacts associated with any kind of generation, additional generation, are, they're real, and this doesn't have a whole lot of impact. That, the footprint on the surface of the earth is pretty small. And
This one it's like 20 acres.
yeah,
And for potentially, well, if you want to dream, maybe a gigawatt of power there's that much potential up there. How much of that we can realize, we don't really know.
yeah.
So this was a federal research grant that got them going again. Is that what it is?
Yeah, we've applied for a DOE grant. And it's all through the BLM. They're the permitting agency because it's a mining operation.
Mhm.
It's subterranean. We're mining heat. So this Forest Service regulates the site on the surface, and the BLM is for the subsurface. And we've put in for a DOE grant. I haven't heard if that's closed yet. I think we've been awarded it, but it's not all the, dominoes haven't fallen yet on getting that closed and done.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very
I
much.
don't want to stop you here. I'm just saying, thank you very much. And,
Give me the boot. Is this?
well, no, yeah,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
running the meeting. I was just saying, thank you. And then, yeah, I mean, getting the word out so people understand what's going on, because we don't want to trick people into thinking, oh, they've been up there for a month doing what? So thank you very much for coming to us before the fact.
I've been trying.
Well, according to your memo, it does say it's going to commence the second week of September. So maybe you know something differently. You said it was going to be a little bit later.
It might be, that might be a little fuzzy. They're not exactly giving me the exact time. I keep asking them, but I would say in the next month, it's going to start up there.
Well, I just had a conversation with Pacific Power and Lake in Klamath County, and they are telling the buyers of the biomass plant in Lakeview that it will take 5 years in order to get Pacific Power capacity there. But I was told the reason why is because some of the equipment they need to actually make that happen is way out there in being built. So I go like, exactly where is it being built? Why is it taking, 5 more years for that biomass plant? So if,
Waiting on for 10 years already, that one.
yeah, no, really, who's building? I mean, is it coming from Germany? Where's it coming from? What you need?
Well, yeah, and I don't have answers for any of that for this plant because we don't have concrete plans for the plant yet. We have to do this phase first, and we don't even know what we have until we complete this reservoir creation phase of the project. Then we'll know what we have, and then we can start just talking about designing plants and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say we're 2030 timeframe for a plant would be
Okay.
kind of how I would think about it.
Well, great. I'm glad you're going to be back at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you
Forward
very
to
much.
hearing about the results.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll probably be back again, hopefully a little sooner, not 10 years.
Oh, yes. All right, we're now at item number 7, the Fort Thompson Lane with Jen Patterson.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. Just here before you again to see if there is interest in pursuing the Oregon State Parks Department's county grant program, county opportunity grant program for the Fort Thompson Lane project, potentially looking at doing some further planning for a recreational campground. Happy to provide more background if you'd like it, but I could turn it over to you now for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. So this grant, because we're over 30,000, does require a 50% match from the county, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then according to your document, it's estimated that it would cost between 150,000 and 200,000.
Correct. If the commissioners wanted to pursue a master conceptual plan.
Okay. So
And I will say that is an estimate based on some calls I did around the state with different counties who have done something similar.
And the matching funds on our end would be likely drawn from account 130, which is a park and campground dedicated account within the county's ledger.
That is one avenue to explore. Whitney's also available to answer further budget questions. But the way the timing of this is set up is the grants due October 1st. Sometime at the beginning of the new year, those who are selected to move forward in the grant process will give a presentation on their projects. And then with the grantee awards being in mid to late spring of next year. So potentially looking at fiscal year 26 for budget impacts on that. So those matching funds can be determined later on in the springtime about exactly what pool of funds to draw those from.
Is this an annual process? Have you figured out? They do it every year.
They do. Yes. Correct.
So as studying this, I would support a point of access assessment spent money by the county, either in the near future or whenever, to really get clear on could we have access from 97 or not? And this is just my starting point for today, thinking that, master conceptual plan project is a big step, and I still don't have a good feel for getting vehicles in and out. We've already done our other feasibility study, just kind of the whole campground concept. And this is just one of those things that's so tangible. What is it going to look like to get vehicles in and out of there? I don't know what that would look like or how much it would cost, but I'm just thinking taking the whole step to the master conceptual plan is a lot bigger at this time.
I know it sounds like we could do it in a year if we actually determine what would happen with Highway 97. How do you get in and off Highway 97 when the cars are going by? What is it, 75, 85 miles an hour? Yes.
Or is it reasonable to do that?
Yeah.
And if not, maybe we're looking at another access point, which is a whole different scenario for residents.
Jen, would a point of access assessment by itself as a standalone project be eligible, or does that need to be part of a park master planning process to be eligible?
So that's a very good question that I haven't looked into particularly in my discussions with other counties and with Oregon State Parks experts. Part of a master conceptual plan could include the transportation access plan. So initially, without asking that specific question, I would think that a transportation access plan could be part of, or could be an eligible expenditure for that grant, as it was going to be part of the broader master conceptual plan portion of the planning grant. As I've seen in other grants, though, particularly with some CREP Odo grants that we submitted in the past, they have part of our grant application excluded some activities versus others. And so I have no idea if this particularly would be. I'm more than happy to look into that. I can call them after this meeting and see if that's something that's eligible for this particular grant. But my initial thought based on what I was looking at is that it could be a eligible project, planning project.
Eligibility is one question. And another question is, if we send to grant reviewers just an access analysis, whether that's going to tickle their fancy. As a person who sat on a lot of grant review, on a lot of grant review committees in the past, I want to be inspired by a potential project. I would be concerned that just putting in for an access analysis might not be that inspiring. I do, I appreciate the interest in kind of containing the effort to what's necessary at this point. I do think that many of the neighbors of the property expressed concerns about the market demand for, for developed campsites at this location. And I think it would be prudent for us also, if access is a potential fatal flaw for the project, I think it'd be prudent also for us to do some more robust financial feasibility analysis, digging into market demand, digging into likely capital construction costs, digging into likely operational costs so that we can really know what we're talking about, whether we've got, something that is genuinely going to be revenue neutral for the county, or whether we're talking about something that wouldn't be financially feasible. So I guess, and it's pretty hard to do a really good capital cost analysis without doing the master planning, because if we don't know where things are going to be, if we don't know how big they're going to be, if we don't know what they're going to look like, you're just kind of waving your hands about what things are going to cost. So those would be reasons in my mind to pursue the full master planning process with the access analysis. I believe the last time that you shared thoughts with us, Jen, you also said, on the higher end of the cost spectrum, we could get some really nice visualizations as well. I mean, maybe that's something that we could leave out. As we, if we were to put in for a master plan, just real basic schematic layout drawings, but not the beautiful visualizations that after we know whether the project is viable or not, are going to inspire people to want to support it. There's a second pitch, not the full meal deal that Jen proposed earlier, but take out the really nice visuals.
It reminds me when we built our first house and the architect came to the property and wrote it down on a napkin. And it was really lovely, but of course, how much did it cost, right? It's on a napkin. To me, this project is like a big black hole that we need to first figure out, can you get in and out from Highway 97? And if we can apply for this in a year, but I do believe that access from 97 is the critical factor here. And I really don't want to spend any county money till that's determined. And I don't believe that we need to apply for this grant to find out from ODOT exactly what is it they will do in order to allow us to go ahead with this.
Well, we could define a very specific ask here. How about a $5,000 matching grant request for access, analysis, and just include this camping feasibility study, which is already $100,000 investment for multiple properties, not just this one, because that's inspiring in itself. And it does back up the big picture about the need, why we would even be thinking about this. So as I say, I support a smaller grant if it's accepted. As I say, if it's not, then we'll just have to make a choice about, whichever fund we want to spend some money out of if you want to do it.
I mean, if you want to apply for $5,000 of grant money, the amount of money, the amount of cost associated with preparing the application and administering the grant, probably outweighs the amount of money we would get from the state. So I don't see much point in that. I mean, if you two are saying you're willing to just pay the full cost of a adequate transportation access analysis, and just skip this grant program, that's fine. We could do that. But I think we're missing out on an opportunity to get state matching funds to learn some of what we need to learn to know whether we should proceed with this project or not.
Well, I did have a project right in this little neighborhood a couple years ago with single wide manufactured homes. The state can definitely give you a letter without spending any money, what their impact is on it. And this could have serious traffic implications to Highway 97, which is already a really, really busy, should be a freeway out there at times when you're going the speed limit and people go by you like you're going backwards. So anyway, I don't even, you know, if you don't want to spend 5,000, I don't want to spend any. I just want to talk to ODOT and see what they say. Somebody surely would give
I
us
didn't
an
say I
answer.
don't want to spend 5,000. I said I don't want to spend 5,000 on grant application and administration, not actually doing the work of.
Well,
of the
I
analysis.
really want to wait a year. I feel like in this issue, I'm perfectly happy to wait. Other issues, as we discussed earlier, no, the homeless, I think that's come to the forefront, and I would love to be able to say, okay, we've actually done something there, but this I believe we could wait a year. And maybe we would be clear in what direction we could take at that time.
I mean, in response to that, I guess I would just say, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Commissioner
have heard
Chang,
from-
Never let me speak last. I would love it. You always have to come back at whatever I say. Okay, we definitely have a difference of opinion here. Sometimes we vote the same, but we clearly have a difference of opinion. So somebody make a motion and we'll see what happens.
I would just like to state that we've heard from Bend Park and Rec District's Board of Directors, some of their directors. We've heard from a number of neighbors adjacent to the property who originally were concerned about the proposal, now are interested in exploring it at least.
That's right.
We've heard from
But we can explore it next year.
We've heard from destination management organizations. We've heard from recreationists who want more trails and parks, that they want us to explore this project now. And I would support moving forward with an application to state parks now to share the cost of getting the information we need to know whether this is a viable project or not. I mean,
Are you making a motion?
I can make a motion. I'll move to approve and whatever you want to do with this. I'll move to approve an application for a grant to the Oregon State Parks and Recreations County Opportunity Grant Program to fund planning for not developing, planning for new camping and support facilities for the county-owned property at Fort Thompson Lane.
Either could it be amended for access point assessment only? Because that, as I say, that's what I would like to do. Keep it real narrow and just include our current feasibility study in the application.
You could not second my motion and put forward yours.
That's fine then.
Okay. So your motion has not been seconded then. You wanted it amended. It wasn't allowed. So
I'll move approval of an application for access point assessment. As I say, my vision is about $5,000 matching to be a $10,000 project, but I don't want to define the project amount at this point. So access point assessment in partnership with the Oregon State Parks Recreation Opportunity Grant Program.
Without a higher dollar payout for the county, I don't think it makes any sense to apply for this grant and spend that amount of money on grant application and administration.
So it's
okay,
the same.
that's your opinion. His opinion is we really need to know, can we get there from Highway 97? That's really the bottom line here before we even go a step further. So what the heck? I'll second it. Any further discussion?
So for discussion, as I say, procedurally, maybe an estimate, as I say, I mentioned a number. I don't know that it needs to be the number. And the application could be a very simple application to the program, including the feasibility study as we've already paid for.
Can I ask if the grant reviewers for Oregon Parks and Recreation don't find this to be a very inspiring ask, does that mean that the county is willing to spend the full amount, whatever it costs, to do the access analysis that's needed.
Well, I actually got an analysis from ODOT without paying anything. I just asked them. So I'm not quite sure that, I
Yeah.
even think I got a letter on it.
I support bringing it back for future discussion.
Yes. Yeah, of course. I mean, that was 2 years ago, maybe. I know things have changed. Their budget is, what is the word? On unstable ground at this moment. So anyway. All right, so
Just for clarification,
we're going to go for the vote?
may I have a clarification real quick?
Sure.
So I have done extensive research on the grant application, and it's a pretty extensive grant application process. So if we do actually want to move forward with the grant application process, today is kind of the deadline of me being able to get all of the information and materials, including letters of support and a lot of supporting documents that they require for this particular grant program. It's not just a application fill out. It's a lot more extensive than that. And I've been in consultant with the Bend Parks and Recs who applied for similar grant programs about kind of the length of this takes, which is a minimum of 30 days, and we're at 26 days now. So if we do want to move forward with a grant application specifically, is there a dollar figure amount that you're putting as a cap for that transportation analysis? I have not asked that question in general. I've had one person provide feedback saying that they thought it was more around 20,000. But again, this is not something I have looked into specifically, just as the aside. So
Yeah,
just
and as I
a
said,
little
I don't-
clarification there.
I don't have a number either. I was just looking to partner with this program to split the cost of it.
Whatever it costs.
So you're saying that the total cost might be 20?
I don't feel comfortable giving a figure except for just saying in one conversation, somebody mentioned that it could be around that amount, but I haven't specifically asked. In my conversations, we were talking more master conceptual plan and the components of that, which included the transportation analysis.
Okay, so
There's a lot to this. I mean, just the transportation analysis. I mean, we need to understand what right of accesses we have. We need to understand what potential access points might be. We need to understand the amount of trips that might be generated and the times of day and the size of vehicles. And then after we understand those things, we need to understand the physical construction of the right in, right out, or whatever it looks like to come off of 97. I think it'd be helpful if we're going to go that far to understand what that's going to cost. So, I mean, it's not a small analysis that we're talking about, even just for the transportation access. So if we're going to put a dollar cap on that, then and it's going to be 5,000, I will vote no. And that's just me, but I just don't think it makes any sense.
Well, and as I say, I disclaimed, I don't know the estimate here. I just mentioned just to the scope of what I was thinking.
and as I said, I got an answer just by writing a letter. So to the state to see. I mean, the state could say, no way are you going to have 300 RVs parked in there coming in and out on Highway 97. I can only imagine that the traffic is going to increase in the future. So where are we at now? Do you want to add
I'd
anything?
still like to proceed. I know there's a lot of variables here. Yeah, let's get to the vote.
So your motion does not include dollar amount.
It does not.
No dollars. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay.
Well, and I think.
I already
Commissioner Garrett
seconded.
seconded it. Yeah.
Sorry. I already did that.
So we're just
All yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so then any more discussion? Then we'll call for the vote. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I'm sure you're glad you're back from vacation. Welcome home. I know. Wouldn't you know it? All right, we're actually at item number 8 now.
Hi, Commissioners. Dave Doyle, County Attorney. This is a item for your consideration of Board Order number 2024-034, which would authorize the Facilities Director and/or the County Administrator to provide approval and signature on budgeted costs for the courthouse expansion construction project. As you know, you've previously authorized a construction budget with the general contractor of 36.7 million and an overall budget of 43.9 million. Based on the county's code, though, signature authority of anything above $250,000 requires running it through the county commissioners. A lot of the invoices and a lot of the charges for that project will be above that. Logistically, it'll cause a little more difficulty and quite frankly, will delay the project somewhat, having to come before you folks to get signatures on bills that want to be paid. So we were hoping that you would sign this order allowing the facilities director and or the county administrator, provided that the invoices are within those budgeted amounts that I just stated, to go ahead and sign without bringing these back before the county commissioners.
Great. Lee, is there any good news you want to share with us regarding our
Status update.
courthouse
Yeah.
project? Like people go, where is it going to be built? And it's like right there.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief update. We're very close in receiving the building permits. That's one of the upcoming bills that initiated this conversation with legal. And so this will allow us to proceed with paying that fee to the city. Currently, that is $833,455. And that, along with the other fees that we've already paid, the good news is we're coming in very close to our budget. We're currently about $18,000 over that $1.2 million or $1.13 million budget for fees and permits. So good news is we're coming in very close to what we budgeted as far as fees and SDC charges. And then the additional good news is we had talked in a recent committee meeting about the possibility of needing to do some water line work in Bond Street. And we've met with the city and identified some solutions for some minor redesign to our proposed hardscape in front of the building to avoid needing to move the existing water line. So those are a couple of big items right now that we've been working through over the last couple of weeks. And we've gotten to a positive outcome on both of them. So I'm happy to share that news.
Excellent news. And you said that perhaps the courthouse completion date was maybe pushed out maybe 4 months or something. So we're thinking maybe April of 2026. Is that where you were at? Somewhere there?
I would say generally spring, but April to May of 2026. We've had kind of a longer than expected pre-construction time through permit review, and some of the design changes and value engineering processes that we went through have extended the schedule by a few months. But we're underway with site development and demolition of some of the existing portion of the building. We will be receiving the infrastructure permit from the City of Bend tomorrow, and that will allow us to begin some of the utility work. So we're excited to get underway.
Have you ever signed $1 million invoice before?
I have not. If I had, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
So, no, I have not done that.
I'm just joking around. So I do support this. You know, we're going to have, checks and balances documenting the whole project, audit after the fact. I'm sure, we'll know where the dollars are flowing. So I do support this order.
And for a little additional clarity, all of the current checks and balances would still be in place. So the county administrator would review those costs as they come through, the CFO, accountants and finance. So there's still multiple levels of review. It just allows us to expend those funds under the approved budget.
And this is all being done underneath the guaranteed maximum price. So
Correct, as well as the overall project budget, which includes things like the building permit fees.
And I do want to acknowledge that the chair of the Facilities Building Review Committee is my neighbor, Jerry Milstad. And I wasn't at the last meeting, and he immediately called me and told me about that water line and what a problem that could be and why were we going to have to pay for it, because First Interstate was right across the street. So this is all good news, and I will be happy to report to him. But really appreciate, it's a group of citizens. If you're ever interested in helping the county out, look at projects that we're doing. And Jerry was actually worked on the courthouse in Crook County. He's now retired, but he's a great citizen of Deschutes County. And I really appreciate hearing from him all the time. So do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of order number 2024-034, authorizing facilities director and/or county administrator approval and signature on budgeted costs for the courthouse expansion construction project.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Great. All right, so now we do have item number 9, which is going to be a hearing, and we do have hours dedicated to it. But I would like to take a 5-minute break before we start.
Deliberations.
Yes, sorry, deliberation. No, it's just deliberations. I misspoke. Of course I did.
5-minute break, you're saying?
Yeah, just 2-minute, 5, 3, whatever. Stephen? Okay, we are now to item reconvening our Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners meeting. Item number 9, deliberations, remand of 710 properties, Eden Properties, plan amendment and zone change. Holly, thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much. For the record, Hallie King with Community Development. And this item before you is the scheduled deliberations for the Eden Properties 710 remand application, file number 247-24-000-395-A. And before we jump into the deliberations matrix, I do want to just briefly recap for the commissioners the process up until this point. So after the initial county proceedings on the plan amendment zone change in 2022, majority of the board approved the application, and then it was subsequently appealed to LUBA and then further on to the Court of Appeals. LUBA then remanded or returned the application back to the county to address a specific set of issue areas. In this case, LUBA determined the original county decision did not include adequate findings or evidence to support their initial approval, again, as it pertains to specific criteria. It's not a reversal or affirmation of the county's decision, but again, essentially a second try for the decision makers to supplement the original decision or come to a different conclusion. The board held a public hearing on the remand application on July 24th, 2024. And again, the application is to rezone and redesignate 710 acres from agriculture to rural residential exception area and rezone from exclusive farm use to rural residential 10. At the July 24th hearing, the commissioners voted to close the oral testimony of the hearing, but left the written record open for a total of 28 days. And we heard, of course, from a number of folks at the public hearing, both on issues related to those that are on remand and those that were not. During the 28-day open record period, the first new evidence and testimony was 14 days. We received 27 public comments, including an applicant's submittal, which included 27 new exhibits, in addition to the 48 that were received the day before the hearing. The 7-day rebuttal period included 4 rebuttal comments, again, including an applicant rebuttal, which included 35 new exhibits. And then the final 7-day final legal argument was for the applicant only, and that included a total of 5 new exhibits for the record. As the board has noted, the record for this application is very large. So we've done our best, in our decision matrix to summarize the issue areas as concisely as possible. Again, certainly we can dive into details as needed, but we've tried to keep it concise, but just noting there is quite large amount of testimony in the record. I do want to note for the record, the open record period closed on August 21st. We did receive a submittal from a oppositional party on August 28th, and in coordination with legal counsel, we are not able to include that in the record as the open record period did close on August 21st. So again, now today we're here for the board deliberations based on the items in the record and to deliberate on the specific LUBA remanded issue areas. As a reminder, state law requires the county to make a decision on remand applications within 120 days of initiation, which means the county's decision is due no later than October 24th, 2024. And during today's deliberations, we'll go through each issue area and ask the board to vote on each of the items as noted in the board decision points on whether or not the criteria has been met or not. And then the results of each vote will determine whether we can move on to the remaining issue areas. Again, depending on the outcome of today, the board can deliberate to a final decision today, or certainly continue deliberations to a future date if needed. And if a final decision is reached today, staff will return to a future meeting to review a draft decision and ordinance. And with that, I wanted to pause before we get into the matrix just to see if there were any commissioner questions before we started.
So just a note, I got good at opening up the laptop and following the record online. I didn't bring my laptop down here. So if we end up referencing something, we either put it up on the display or look
I
at
have
the
it in my
copy that she
binder.
has. Yeah, so I just didn't bring my laptop down. I don't
Like,
usually.
what is it, 80 pounds of binders? Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you,
It's heavy.
Holly.
Yeah, we can certainly display.
Yeah, just in case if something comes up, and acknowledging that.
Yep.
And then also, just a couple thoughts, show your homework. You know, Will mentioned that when our work session before we came up here. So you mentioned this isn't a approval or denial. It's just a definition of showing more content on the decision. So as I say, thank you for our planning director to even put the scope on what are we doing here and how do we get here? So we're really showing our homework. But then on the other hand, we've done, plan amendments and zone changes in the past. This feels like all new territory, and it just kind of scares me that how much are we legislating a state land use system or, sharpening the pencil even more about state land use system? What's the difference between this land other than, geography from, not next to a UGB, I guess is the only thing that I would see that's different. So, yeah, but as I say, we could debate that all day, but just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Commissioner DeBonne. Any other questions before we can start? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead. So again, we printed out a large copy of the decision matrix that's also in the board's packet. So starting on page 1, issue area number 1 ties into the definition of agricultural land and farm use pursuant to Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules. Again, this is pulled directly from the LUBA remand document. And so again, the first question for the board is to essentially needing to consider the profitability of farm activity for the subject property if utilized in conjunction with other property. Again, the OARs require that nearby or adjacent land shall be examined to the extent that a lot or parcel is suitable for farm use or necessary to permit farm practices undertaken on adjacent or nearby lands. So again, in simple terms, the question is the subject property suitable for farm use in conjunction with other property? And again, as I go through the decision matrix, I won't read word for word because we might be here a very long time.
Please do.
Again, I'm going to kind of hit the key points in each column, but we can certainly go back to questions or discussion on any of them that you would like. So again, the LUBA remand decision failed to consider the ability to use the property in conjunction with other property as it relates to farm use. So again, we heard from applicant and opposition on this topic area. The applicant, was looking again at nearby farm properties, which include the former Volwood Farms, which is down to the west below the canyon along Buckhorn, Nickel Valley Farms nearby, and the Stab and Buchanan properties to the east of the subject property, southeast. Essentially, the applicant asserts that the subject property, again, is not suitable for irrigated agriculture due to cost of water right acquisition, wells, pumps, and irrigation pivots, and the cost that goes into that. Primarily related to the ability to use it in conjunction, the applicant submitted exhibits from rancher Mr. Rand Campbell, who did an economic analysis on utilization of the Buchanan property with the subject property, and found that it wouldn't be profitable, again, as it would just be the cost to set up the use would be too prohibitive. A few other, again, pieces in the record from other farmers stated they would not combine operations with the Eden property due to lack of irrigation, improvement cost of farming, inadequate forage, difficult seeding, and the arid climate in order, which would prevent successful germination. Again, opponents, on this issue area mostly heard from the Buchanans, adjacent owners, and operators of Keystone Natural Beef, stating that they would like to expand their cattle ranching on the property, and gave a number of reasons for why they would use it, again, primarily tied to seasonal grazing. And so again, based on the question for the board, is based on the evidence in the record, is the subject property suitable for farm use in conjunction with other property? If no, then the board can continue reviewing the applications and move on to the other issue areas. If yes, then the board must deny the application.
Well, interesting. When you look at the analysis, what was it? You could run 11 cow and calves during dry years and maybe up to 24 pairs during wet years, but it's really a short period of time. And then the other 6 months of the year, you have to buy hay. And their hay costs, there was a article cited from the Nugget, the Sisters Nugget, about hay prices in Central Oregon are like the highest in the nation. They are. And I thought their hay costs, I know that for cattle, you can be a little more, there's more leeway in what you can feed a cow than a horse, but it was truly, for the cost of this land, it wasn't cost effective. And the fact that, isn't it amazing that 71% of the land, I don't see it here mentioned, but 71% of this land is soils testing 7 and 8, which is the worst. And the fact that I grew up with a rocky hillside on one side of my family's ranch, that we never turned out cows because there was never hardly any grass out there. So yeah, I grew up with that, like the 710 project, and I can see it and talk to my family, and it's there's not much there to feed a cow. And then you're going to have to supplement at least 6-8 months of the year, a cow and calf. So I don't, they keep wanting like more documentation, and I'm going like, I'm really, I thought what they added to the record was really excellent. Read a lot of different proposals, but definitely it's a hard piece of ground to run anything effective. And then I thought it was good that later, Holly, they added the article about the goat sheep operation. And I don't know if this room is aware, but wool prices today are horrible. So really I can't imagine what it went back to, like the 1970s or something, what people actually get for their wool. And we have a lot of sheep in Sisters, but most of them you see are on like nice little flat ground, and they eat irrigated pastures. So, it didn't seem like it was, they would have to bring water up there in order for a sheep to be really happy.
So this specific issue is asking whether the subject property could be used in conjunction with other property for farm use. We've heard a very persuasive analysis that the property can't be used alone as a farm, or for grazing purposes, or for irrigation, or for anything else. But the specific issue we're trying to address right here is whether it could be used in conjunction with other property for farm use. Clearly, if one of the adjacent farmers, ranchers, is saying that it could be used as part of their operation, it could be used in conjunction with other property as a farm use. So on this question, I'm going to be voting yes.
But the people that said it could be used did buy other things. And if they really were considered, because their whole history was in one of these binders of what they were buying. And I believe they just now moved their cattle over to their Powell Butte irrigated land. And I know one of my neighbors down the street actually told me they move their cattle in the summer to Mount Hood. They keep them close to home in the winter when they're calving and things, but they move them to Mount Hood where there's more pasture land now. So most of the surrounding people, I think 2 of them didn't comment, but the other ones were supportive, other than that one party.
That's what ranching is about. It's about moving your livestock from area to area to address their forage needs.
Commissioner Chang, my family happens to raise cows for the first time in 50 years. I had to move them off the Forest Service because of fires this summer, and they had grass up to the bellies of the cows. So yes, I get almost daily pictures from my family and where they run cows. And yes, you have to move them where the fires aren't and where the grass is.
Yeah. So for all these years that your family has ranched, would they have been able to run a viable ranch operation at that scale without the, in conjunction with other property, i.e. the Forest Service grazing allotment?
Commissioner Chang, I just said they had the 710 hill on the, I don't know what, north side, and they never ran cows out there because there was never enough grass. They
Right.
would run horses out there if they didn't want to have the farrier come, because it would definitely trim their feet because it was a rocky
But
hillside.
would a ranching operation at that scale have been feasible without your Forest Service allotment?
Oh, they didn't have that for quite a while. When I was growing up, we didn't have that. So no, they didn't have it. It's,
So why do they need it now? You just.
well,
you
because
just
they
said that
expanded
emphasis.
their operations.
Okay, so would a,
But
would
this
a,
isn't-
would
this
a
isn't cattle
operation
land.
at that scale be feasible without, in conjunction with other property?
They don't use it for their cattle, the
So-
rocky hillside.
Oh,
And this doesn't look, it's 70,
I'm talking about the Forest Service allotment. So the Buchanans can do X with the
they could have
land that
bought
they
it.
have.
They were definitely buying other things. They could have
Well,
bought
it's
it if
pretty-
they thought it was
Pretty
good.
hard to buy land if land that is zoned EFU is not selling at EFU prices, which is the whole issue at stake in this land use decision. If we send a signal to people, you can just buy any EFU zone land out there and get it rezoned for rural residential development to build, high-end homes. People are going to pay a lot more for EFU zoned land, and it will be out of reach of local farmers.
Well, I think local farmers had an opportunity to buy this land the last 20 years, maybe, perhaps. I don't know how long historically it was on the market, but this is definitely 71%, 7 and 8. And anybody walking it can see all the rocks. It grows rocks.
The local farmers had a chance to buy the land, but if the land price was essentially inflated through speculation that could be used for something else, much higher economic value use, then local farmers didn't have a chance to see the price go down to what would be a reasonable price for EFU zone land that someone intended to use for EFU purposes.
So it kind of goes back to, could you farm for a profit? Is there value in this land for farming, for the property owner or the neighbor? And I would conclude no.
I would conclude no too.
I would
But
conclude
the-
yes.
But the documentation, I thought was really outstanding. The details, the different people that were interviewed. Yes.
Thank you, commissioners. With a majority no on issue area 1, we can move on to issue area number 2. Okay, so this next area relates to the source of feed to support on-site livestock and equine uses. LUBA found that the county's prior decision did not evaluate suitability if feed was provided by off-site sources. The applicant asserts that the cost of importation of feed is very substantial and would render essentially a net loss in profits due to inability to limited forage, poor soils on the subject property. And certainly keeping livestock on the property would require importation of feed and again, costs more. The applicant's final legal argument again relies on information in the record from Mr. Rand Campbell, who looks at the economic viability of livestock, poultry, equine operations, as well as chickens. And then additionally, he again concluded that importing feed is a money-losing proposition. Central Oregon Land Watch included evidence in the record that looked at the location of nearby feed stores that are able to deliver feed directly
Haley.
to area farms.
Anybody that wants to make a profit with their cattle are not going to buy their hay from a feed store. And I don't believe they need grain. They need salt blocks, et cetera, those kind of products. But you have to buy it from a rancher, and still, as I mentioned in the prior statement, hey, in our Central Oregon is really when you look on the Capitol Press, hay in Central Oregon is higher than a lot of other regions and I know they give them big bales, but then you have that waste factor, which was clearly represented here. If your cows are into the hay, they're going to waste like 10 to 20% of it. So that adds to the cost, but you don't buy it from the feed store unless you're buying salt blocks, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like going feed store. Oh my gosh. As much as I love my feed stores, yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Derrick.
Well, this happens to be my life.
Absolutely. And so again, other opponents say, it's, potentially suitable for equines and horses. One opponent points to other equine operations in the area. The applicant asserts that those are all on pasture irrigated acreage, different than the subject property. So again, the question for the board on this issue area is, based on the evidence in the record, is the subject property suitable for the feeding, breeding, management, and sale of livestock and poultry, or the stabling or training of equines for the primary purpose of obtaining a profit in money if feed is imported from off-site? Again, if no, the board can continue reviewing the applications. If yes, the board must deny the application.
So I'm going to refer to some agricultural lands in the Arnold Irrigation District. In the last few years, ranchers, livestock producers in that irrigation district have had their water deliveries halted in July. And as a result, they have not been able to grow the feed on site to serve their herd size. All right, and they've shrunk their herds over time, if needed, but they have needed to import feed in order to continue to viably ranch and produce livestock on their properties in the Arnold Irrigation District. If we say that a farm that needs to import feed is not agricultural, then essentially what we're saying is that all of those farmers in the Arnold Irrigation District should have their land stripped of its zoning, stripped of its EFU tax deferment, and rezoned as rural residential. And I think that is that would be an egregious mistake. So I will be voting yes on this.
So as I say, the condition of this land, the location, the elevation relative to, and the history of farming, and the goal of obtaining, profit in money, I would say no.
And I would say no too. Do we have enough documentation in, I thought Mr. Campbell's references were excellent. If that can go into the record a bit. I think that's clear, looking at all the different animals. Okay, so what, put a chicken farm up there? I mean, honestly, I'm sure that would, and then of course we've got the bird flu and honestly, in America today, we have the fewest cattle herds that we've had in like 70 years, something like that. It's unbelievable how few cows, but this isn't the spot where we want to be raising them. We need more than 11 to 24 pairs of cows and cows.
So Commissioner Chang, just following up, anybody in an irrigation district that in the high desert climate, you have the spring rains, you have snow melt, and yes, irrigation be cut off, but being able to get to July with irrigation water is going to get a field green for at least that first part of the summer, which is quite a bit of forage. So that's hugely different than this property. And
actually, Arnold didn't cut off this year. So that, thank goodness, they were able to keep their fields green. So, and the amazing thing is when my family had to move their cattle out of the mountains, the grass, because there was so much rain in May, the grass over by Ukiah actually was up to the cows' bellies. I couldn't believe it. It was the best grass in decades. And yet,
Then it all burned.
yeah, what did we had? 1.5 million acres in the state burned. So
There are a whole lot of properties that are irrigation district served that have better water rights than the farmers in the Arnold Irrigation District, but mostly in COID, whose rezones we've approved just in the last 3 years. On the grounds that, it wasn't profitable enough, or it wasn't, the land wasn't productive enough. So, yeah, I disagree with your point. And I would say that, the proof that something is farmland and that it is something that someone could farm with the intent to make a profit is that there is a farmer who says they want to do that. Quite simply. So still voting yes on this one item.
Thank you. We can move on to issue area number 3. And this one ties back to the definition of agricultural land and farm use. And part of that definition includes the on-site construction and maintenance of equipment and facilities used for activities described in this subsection. So again, pointing back to crops, livestock, equine type uses. And so the LUBA remanded this issue, asking the board to identify whether the property is suitable for the construction or maintenance of equipment and facilities used for farm activities, even where those farm activities occur on other lands. And this one is a bit interesting because we think LUBA, their decision was a tad bit confusing because of staff understands that standalone commercial ranch and farm stores are not a permitted use outright on EFU zoning. That's under the commercial activity in conjunction with farm use, which again is where there's a farm use occurring on the subject property, and then there's a store, farm or ranch store that's tied to that farm use. However, staff understands more of the remanded issue to look at whether an adjacent property, like the Buchanans, for example, obviously they have a farm use occurring. What's the suitability of the property if they were to use the Eden property, for example, for construction, maintenance of equipment and facilities? So that's, LUBA again didn't sort of parse this out as much as we think they could have, but the applicant wanted to address kind of both of these possibilities in their response. So again, going back to whether or not the property's, again, suitable for construction of equipment, related to, again, it all ties back to the profitability factor. Looking at those suitability factors, again, the cost would simply be too high due to property setup, roads, preparation, distance for another farm property to use that property for, let's say, a barn, for example, for their hay. And then also they have evidence in the record that it's not a typical common farm practice for a farm to use a nearby property for storage or other types of support buildings. Typically that's, closer in, adjacent on their own property.
I believe, yes, that most of the surrounding have adequate acreage in order to do their own situation. I found this like such a stretch. Like, what are they really talking about? Because I know you have a shop, when you've got a ranch, you've got a shop and it's right there and you've got what you need to do to keep all your property maintained. And I've never, unless your neighbor has a tool that you don't have, I can't imagine looking elsewhere when you're running your operation.
Yeah, and so again, some opposition in the record. The Buchanan said that they could store farm equipment on the subject property. The applicant looked at things like distance, right? Road travel time, lack of existing roadways to the property as barriers, again, that would just simply increase the cost. let's see, and again, farm and ranch stores without a primary farm use is a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. DLCD in their comments acknowledged that the property lacks urban services and adequate transportation to support that type of a commercial farm store, for example.
So does this refer to all the different farm businesses that they went to that are in Redmond and Bend, like Pape, et cetera? Is that what this one is referring to? That should we do a Pape store up here in the middle of the 710 acres?
Yeah, and so the applicant included information in the record. Again, staff doesn't believe that type of use is allowed under the definition of farm use because it's a commercial operation without a primary farm use on the property. But again, I believe the applicant wanted to make sure they were addressing all of LUBA's remanded issues. But again, that type of use is not, as we understand it, not in the farm use definition.
I believe there were like 5 different businesses that they cited within documentation.
Correct.
Yeah, there was one in Redmond. Yep. There were quite a few. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. And
As I read this, ORS, the revised statutes, the state law says farm uses includes on-site construction and maintenance. So that was I'm just thinking big picture, and this is how I would decide this. A farm has farm activities, growing a crop for a product, or, do farm activities for profit. And it was just an acknowledgement that there could be large type construction and maintenance activities on a farm. So then the rules, OAR, talks about farm activities. And it is kind of the catch-22, as in if you're not farming for a profit, why would you have this? So as I say, this is just kind of running ourselves into a brick wall. So I would like to, I can say more on this, but yeah, let's work with crafting an answer on this, showing our work. But yeah, I mean, I don't see stopping because somebody has land somewhere where you could put a building and work on a tractor. I mean, this is just silly.
Well, but I mean, this specific issue is about whether the land is suitable to do these things, even if you could do it somewhere else in the area. I mean, is the property suitable for the construction and maintenance of equipment and facilities used for farm activities, even where those farm activities occur on other lands?
Yeah, we could do it in the parking lot here too.
Yeah. I mean, in the opponent testimony, there were people who said, if the property is suitable for the construction of new homes, it's suitable for it's appropriate for the construction of any type of farm structure. I mean,
So as I say, poor DLCD is in a tough spot here because they're looking to narrow the path of property rights. And this is pretty convoluted concept here.
Thank you for those comments. Yes. Yes, thinking about where I grew up, everybody had a shop. There was like a small ranchers every mile up the road on Little Butter Creek, and everybody had their own shop. That's what you have to do when you have to improvise, you have to figure out how to do it, sometimes baling wire, baling twine, whatever. But yeah, to want to do this up on that hill, oh my gosh.
Well, I just think if the adjacent farmer owned this land, had access to this land, they might build things like holding pens, storage sheds, barns, etc. So,
okay, so
as I say, enough information I don't even think it's appropriate to answer this question. This is
yeah, I mean, I think we
craft something
really clever.
Yeah. So again, it sounds like we have 2 commissioners thinking that no, the property is not suitable.
But see, that's the wrong question and answer, though. I mean, suitable for a shop to change the oil in a tractor, you could do that anywhere. So that's not even the right kind of question and answer. So as I say, that's why I'm hesitant to.
Yeah. And again, to page 45 of LUBA's remanded decision, again, just was looking at, again, other property, farm uses occurring on other properties and whether the subject property could include, again, construction, maintenance of equipment
Yeah.
for those activities. And
that's where they're trying to as I say, this is a tough spot. They're trying to define state law for the purpose of ruralness and open space and holding on to this definition of exclusive farm use in the state of Oregon statewide, and in Deschutes County, this doesn't jive.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and the applicant, again, they included information talking about, properties within 1 mile or more. This type of farm practice isn't common, again, and it's not a generally accepted farm practice to store, repair, maintain facilities for other farms in the area. So that's in the applicant's final legal argument. And again, it's tying back to profit. So
It's kind of like when you think about people that live within a city, they need a storage unit because they have extra things, or they put their boat somewhere for the winter or whatever. But when you have a ranch or a farm, normally you figure out locations on your property where you make things as convenient as possible.
Ellie, so if I'm tracking correctly, what a remand means is that LUBA finds that LUBA believes that the county's initial decision did not include sufficient findings or evidence in order for LUBA to either uphold or reject the county's decision. So if we don't make a decision on this specific issue that LUBA asked us to make a decision about, and trying to provide a finding, I mean, does that basically just set this specific issue up for us to make a decision? This gets appealed to LUBA, and then they say, you still didn't provide sufficient findings or evidence, so remand it to us again?
yeah, and I may, if legal counsel or Will's here to touch on that, I agree exactly kind of what you're saying. If the findings that the board has made, in this decision-making process, if it gets appealed, I think LUBA could certainly remand it again if they're still not seeing the fact pattern that led to that decision.
So I would say for all parties involved, it would make life more efficient if we come to a conclusion on the specific question that LUBA has referred back to us.
Well,
My answer is yes.
And I support the fact that we will show our work and define the logic of the conclusion of the overall decision here with the help of our professionals and the, information in the record.
Will, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Madam Chair, Will Groves, your planning manager, for the record. I just wanted to acknowledge you're on the right track here. LUBA's asked you to, again, show your work in a specific way with regard to a question. And so it'll be important to answer that question if the board's hoping to avoid a remand or a reversal on that topic. It sounds like what we've got is a direction to staff to, and not to presume, but if the applicant's the prevailing party, to write a decision that captures the deliberative discussions that the board's had on this matter and present you with a draft decision that would align with your thoughts on this matter. And that's something that we can do, or the applicant, who, if they're the prevailing party, would have an opportunity to draft a decision in alignment with that.
The good news is today is September 4th, and this decision is not due until October 24th. So we really have an opportunity to fine tune it and not get this back on remand. But clearly, we will do our very best.
And we've been in this situation before where the commissioners really are looking to see the language of the decision to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. The deliberative action here is to give staff and the applicant, if they're the prevailing party, enough information to draft a decision that generally aligns with the board's pleasure. And it appears that we have that information today, or we can present something to you that we think would be in alignment with the discussion you've had to date and get some feedback. Certainly if that draft decision is out of alignment with the outcome you'd like to see, we make those edits and bring them back to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Will.
So again, just to jump back to the decision point, again, I think I know the direction the board's wanting to go, but again, given the factors listed in the Oregon administrative rules, is the property suitable for the construction or maintenance of equipment and facilities used for farm activities, even where those farm activities occur on other lands? If no, we can move on to the next issue area. If yes, the board must deny the application.
So I'll say the word no, so we can proceed. But as I say, the way the question is provided and the whole scenario is it's not very logical is my point.
I know you look at this whole list, soil fertility, no, suitable for grazing, no, climate, available water, irrigation, and then accepted farming practices. I mean, oh my gosh. Okay. Highlight that one for me.
So the next issue area, again, is tying back to the definition of agricultural land, which is defined in the OARs as land that is necessary to permit farm practices to be undertaken on adjacent or nearby agricultural lands. Again, the question for Luba posed the question again that the county's findings on remand must evaluate impacts of water, traffic, nuisance, and trespass, and determine whether any of those impacts will prevent farm practices from continuing on adjacent or nearby lands. Again, the Court of Appeals in their affirmation of the Luba remand agreed that the retention of the EFU zone must meet the high standard that it is truly necessary. And the court found necessary means whatever is essential for some purpose and things that must be had. Again, so that's the test. The applicant provided in the decision, the prior decision, adjacent and nearby lands and those farm practices. And so in looking at the impacts test, the applicant is asserting that the impacts test should only be applied to those lands, again, adjacent and nearby. The opponent, again, argued that the holdings of the Stop the Dump case would apply, and which is a more stringent test than the necessary to permit farm practices. DLCD agrees that necessary to permit farm practices applies and claims that evidence has been provided that the residential use may have significant impacts related to traffic and water. Staff in this evaluation of the impacts, we would recommend that the board follow the test as set out by Luba and the Court of Appeals. Again, tying back to is retention of the EFU zone necessary to prevent or to avoid impacts to farmlands. And so this issue area, we do have, I have broken out on the next few pages, the issues of water, traffic, and nuisance and trespass to kind of dive into each of those in more detail. Again, so if it makes sense for the board, we may jump to those first to kind of get in the details and then come back to the larger question. Again, and the larger question for the board is retention of the property's agricultural designation necessary to permit farm practices on adjacent or nearby lands? So I'm going to jump to page 5 where we can start with traffic first. So again, in the original proceedings, the board concluded that traffic impacts would not prevent farm practices. However, Luba found that the findings did not properly set out the facts that the board relied upon and explain how the facts led to their conclusion. So the applicant provided additional evidence in the record, specifically Exhibit 49, which was a Transite Consulting traffic, additional traffic memo, which submitted evidence that discussed that Coiner Avenue is wide enough, including its shoulders, to allow safe passage of farm and hay equipment. And then again, just asserting that the potential trip generation by the proposal rezone of 71 dwellings would not create any level of service issues or operational deficiencies in the area roadways, excuse me. Again, there was evidence from some opposition talking about Lower Bridgeway and Buckhorn Road and a concern with traffic on those roadways, which is used by Two Canyons LLC, which is a large farm there on the west side of the property. But in the record, the applicant is not proposing to utilize Buckhorn Road or Lower Bridgeway as part of any future development. They have included some conditions saying that any access on the north end of the site would be emergency access only. So again, primarily any development would be using Coiner Avenue. Again, some concerns about just general vehicle conflicts with livestock and farming equipment. I do want to note for the record, the applicant did include a condition of approval, proposed condition of approval, limiting the residential development of the subject property to 71 dwellings. So just note that that'll come up in a few other of our issue areas, but that was a proposed condition of approval related to this issue area.
That would forego the potential ADUs. Is that
correct? That's my understanding. Yep.
On an interesting side note, there was a farmer going down Highway 126 on Sunday because my son couldn't understand why the traffic was so slow. And I go, Jeff, you're in Central Oregon, farmers do rule. So they were going down it, and I noticed that they have to have a special sign on the back of their vehicle, but they were going down it and the traffic was going like 30 miles an hour and he couldn't believe it. So yes. So yeah. It's amazing, the traffic analysis that is here from Transite Consulting.
Yep. And so again, the question of the board decision point is, given the applicant's proposed condition of approval, is it necessary for the ag land exclusive farm use designation of the property to be retained to permit farm practices to occur on adjoining or nearby ag lands, specifically due to traffic impacts? If no, the board can continue reviewing the application and move on to other issue areas. If yes, the board must deny the application.
So yeah, I would conclude no on this. This doesn't preclude. There will be agricultural traffic. There'll be more residential traffic, but the 71 dwelling condition sure puts a ceiling on that.
It does look like it's Exhibit 46, which is the exhibit from the traffic analysis instead of 49 in my binder.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Adair. That might be a typo. So
okay,
we can confirm that here.
I mean, because this one is dated July 23rd, 2024. So was there one after that?
I believe there may have been. Let me pull up our list here.
I don't have a 49.
Oh, so there is an exhibit. So Exhibit 46 was submitted before the hearing.
Okay.
And then Exhibit 49 was submitted during the first open record period, the new evidence and testimony. And in the binders and in the record, the exhibit numbers are noted at the bottom of each page.
Okay.
I would say while I'm concerned about the additional traffic in the area from the potential future development, I don't think we could say it's necessary for the agricultural land EFU designation to be retained to permit farm practices to occur on adjacent or adjoining or nearby agricultural lands. So I'll say no on this one.
And I will say no also.
You commissioners. Okay. For page 6, again, this is specific to potential water impacts. Again, as it ties to the definition of ag land, which is land that is necessary to permit farm practices to be undertaken. Again, LUBA found the board must address water impacts and look at the necessary to permit provision of that definition. So the applicant, again, as part of the original record, they submitted a GSI water solution study that found that exempt wells to meet the water needs of the new future residential development would be unlikely to have a measurable interference on agricultural wells and domestic wells in the area. The applicant also included Exhibit 74 and 110, which was some additional water analysis from Cascade Geotechnical, which is definitely worth looking at. One of their conclusions was that the groundwater use of 71 homes equals about that of 27 acres of irrigation. So that was a statistic and information in that record. Again, as part of the initial proceedings, we had Oregon Water Resources Regional Manager Kyle Gorman, who testified that, there is a decline, about 9 feet of decline in 25 years, but that the aquifer is, quote, robust, and that declines are due primarily to drought in the area. Let's see, the opposition submitted, Red Side Restoration introduced a letter by Bob Long of CWM H2O, a water expert, that concluded, exempt users aren't required to provide any mitigation. And so exempt well use, no matter how small, may cause decline in groundwater. And that could affect agricultural water use, potentially increase the cost of pumping well water and or well deepening in the area. And again, the question to the board is, do these impacts preclude farming operations, and that the existing designation is necessary to allow farm practices on adjacent and nearby lands? And wanted to also note, again, with the condition of approval related to limiting to 71 dwellings, the applicant also has a condition of approval to voluntarily reduce the amount of water to be used from exempt wells for irrigation purposes. Oregon Water Resources Department allows 1/2 acre of irrigation for residential exempt well users. For non-commercial irrigation, so lawns, yards, the applicant has proposed to voluntarily reduce that to 1/4 of an acre, which would be something that would be in a condition of approval, in potentially in, if the board agrees, in CCNRs regulated by a presumed future HOA, for example.
So to repeat what you just said, to reduce it from 1/2 acre to 1/4 of an acre.
Yep, for irrigation purposes.
For irrigation purposes, of which when summertime, if the average family uses like 450 gallons during the winter, it goes up to 1,500. So we're assuming then that would go up to maybe like 800 gallons a day.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and their GSI water report concluded about 2,500 gallons per lot per day. And so again, it's they gave a rough estimate of a typical residential water use. And then yeah, so again, the question for the board is, given these conditions of approval, is it necessary to retain the exclusive farm use zoning to permit farm practices to be undertaken on adjacent and nearby lands due to water impacts related to the use of exempt groundwater wells? If no, the board can continue reviewing the applications. If yes, the board must deny the applications.
All right, we need to start at the 90,000-foot level to address this one. Kyle Gorman said, well, 9 feet of decline in 25 years. The other pieces that you captured, and this was when Kyle was still at Oregon Water Resources Department, or is this in a consulting capacity?
This was during the proceedings in 2022 when he was
still working.
WRD.
Yes.
Yep.
It was testimony. It was a well in that area that he gave the citing of the 9 feet in 25 years.
I would say snipping those two little pieces, saying that the groundwater resource is robust, and the primary driver of the decline is drought, is kind of mischaracterizing the completeness of information that we have received from Oregon Water Resources Department. What we know is that we have experienced significant groundwater declines in the Deschutes Basin. So in some places, a lot more than in other places, but 9 feet of decline is a significant amount. We have also heard from people in the near vicinity that they have had wells go dry in recent years. The primary driver of decline of groundwater levels is declining precipitation, but that's exacerbated by or it's compounded by groundwater extraction. So, Oregon Water Resources Department 10 years ago, when we had less straws in the ground than we do now, Oregon Water Resources Department found that, you have drought, below average precipitation for 20 years, which calls into question whether your historic averages are ever going to come back. But we've had below average precipitation for 20 years. And then on top of that, we've had, groundwater extraction. 10 years ago, groundwater extraction accounted for maybe 25% of the decline we were seeing. Now it is probably significantly more because we've seen the amount of water available decline a significant amount, and then every drop of that water that you take out of the ground adds to the decline of the groundwater levels. So that's the context. Now, if this land stayed EFU zoned, in order for, if someone did want to do irrigated agriculture on the land, they would need to get a non-exempt well permit. And that would require approval from the Oregon Water Resources Department. So there would be a very robust and firm and clear process for determining whether there was groundwater available to support that use. If this land is rezoned and 71 homes are built, each with access to an exempt well, going to 1/4 of an acre is good, but it's still a vastly larger amount of water consumption per household than what we see inside of our incorporated cities. And that, I see somebody shaking their head in the background. 1/4 of an acre of irrigated landscape doesn't compare to the couple of 100 feet that you have in a typical urban home, or for the homes that are being created that are part of multifamily housing. They might have no irrigated landscape. So if we're talking about conditions, that would actually provide assurance that we're not going to impact groundwater levels. I think the acreage, the allowable acreage would have to be smaller. I think that a better way to approach this would be to meter the homes and have an agreed upon amount. So you could firmly set a threshold that allowed you to say we're having a negligible impact on groundwater resources in the area. So I appreciate the effort to kind of go to conditions to try to address concerns about groundwater consumption, but I think the conditions would have to go a lot farther for me to support, this package.
Okay, I wanted to bring up that the second highest producing well in the state of Oregon is in this area of Deschutes County, second highest. I believe it's 8,000 gallons a minute when both pumps are running. So there is that situation. And the other side, I don't see anything here mentioned about removing junipers, but I believe that was somewhere in the back of my mind that juniper removal was going to happen, and learning that junipers use moisture, 24/7 all year long. if they're going to do something to help with the juniper takeover of Central Oregon, I think that's really, I don't see it mentioned, but I think it's significant. I know there's a lot of junipers up there. So is it mentioned somewhere in here?
Don't recall in the remand proceedings. I do recall something in the initial process.
Okay, so I just think it's worth repeating, especially since they've cut back on the size of landscaping, but the fact that they understand that they're sucking up 25 to 40 gallons every day, depending on drought. Now, if it's, they cut back if it's a really drought season, but they're still taking out of the ground, and anything that falls on them doesn't get into the ground. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. And certainly with, I'm sure construction of roadways, any site grading, that would certainly lead to possible juniper removal, just that in and of itself.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's also true that if a substantial amount of that post-European settlement juniper was rolled back right now, that the forage production of that piece of land would be dramatically higher, which I think would affect a lot of people's, evaluation of whether it was suitable for dryland grazing or not.
But then again, you've got the rocks. Don't forget the rocks are there. And they grow.
The side of the property, yeah. But big flat plateau on top, full of juniper. All of the primary productivity of that plateau for years and years of years has mostly gone into growing juniper when it could have been grown grass.
So yeah, I would conclude no. There is an impact. I mean, we all acknowledge it. It's a dry period of time, but we have a very robust aquifer, as the experts have said. And then even in the opponent testimony, will cause some decline. I mean, it's just, those are all just facts, but this isn't a stopping point for me.
And I would love it if you would add something about juniper, just because I have to drive through thousands of them every day. And they're really, when you see pictures from 80 years ago, they weren't here in any kind of level. So I'd say no also. And I'm glad they've cut it back to 1/4 of an acre. And the fact that people with exempt wells are allowed 15,000 gallons of water a day. I think people are really conscientious. I know I learned to be really conscientious in 1979 when I was in Germany, and they told me, do not take long showers. We have to be very frugal with our water. And you know what? That stuck with me. Everyone here's, how do we do something more in this community? How do we get our gray water out there? There's a lot of good things that we could be doing that we're not doing yet.
Well, my experience, Southern Deschutes County, domestic wells on 1 to 3 to 5 acre parcels. There's minimal people putting in a green lawn and, really utilizing a lot of water. I mean, there's some, but I mean, if you go down a road, you only see a few of them. So it's not everybody.
Thank you, commissioners. We'll move on to issue area number 7.
Okay, I do want to check with everyone. It is 12:02 right now. We're at 7, we have 8, 9, and then we go back. So do we want to continue going now? Is that okay with everyone? I do believe we have an executive session this afternoon too. So we're all sitting here. Are we okay to go ahead?
Fine, yeah.
Consensus? Okay.
Well, yeah, so
you okay?
did break this up into 2, but yeah, let's go for a while here.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just wanted to check.
Too much longer. Okay. So issue area 7 again is tying back to is the retention of the EFU zone necessary to permit farm practices in the vein of nuisance and trespass. And so again, looking at potential impacts of nuisance and trespass as a result of the zone change, and whether that retaining the EFU zone is again necessary to permit farm practices. On remand, there was no, we didn't hear too much from opposition regarding nuisance and trespass, but again, LUBA wanted the county to add additional evidence for this specific issue area. The applicant points to right to farm law, which limits nuisance and trespass lawsuits against farm operators, so protecting the farmer. Again, the applicant proposed a few conditions of approval relating to this topic area. again, enforceable by a restrictive covenant, conditions of approval. One was those who were to develop a new home on the property would sign the county's exclusive farm use agreement. It's waiver of remonstrance, or farm and forest easement is also what we call it, which essentially protects accepted farm practices. It's the property owner acknowledging they live in a farm area, agricultural area, and it limits their rights to complain essentially about farm uses nearby. And that wouldn't be required under the RR10 zone. So the applicant is taking it one step further and requiring that for any future residential development here. The second was new homes would have a special 100-foot setback from adjacent properties engaged in farm use. Again, those are really going to be the properties along Northwest Coiner that are the closest. Again, that is not a requirement in the RR10 zone. Next would be to construct a fence on or near the common boundary where it may be missing, and post and maintain no trespassing signs along or close to the boundary with the former Volwood Farms or Two Canyons property at intervals of 250 feet. And that is the one farm property that adjoins the subject property at more than one point and is not separated from it by a road. And the applicant claims that these measures would significantly minimize potential nuisance and trespass conflicts between farm and non-farm uses. Again, opponents, DLCD was really the one, the main comment party who wanted to see more, analysis on these impacts and how, will they be significant? Will they prevent farm practices on adjacent properties? So again, the question for the board is, considering the proposed conditions of approval agreement, will potential nuisance and trespass impacts associated with the application prevent continuation of farm practices on nearby or adjacent lands? If no, the board can continue reviewing. If yes, the board must deny the applications.
So I know we have code that already is right to farm. So I'm not, the applicant's offering condition of approval by recorded restrictive covenant, but hopefully we have that already in place. So that just feels like it's belt and suspenders for me. But other than that, once again, we're just in that spot where we're going to show our work. And I conclude that this does not stop us from proceeding.
And I agree.
I'm not concerned about this issue.
Okay, so the next issue area, 8A and 8B, are related, which is why I numbered it that way. And it's related to the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan Goal 1, which talks about preserving and maintaining agricultural lands in the agricultural industry. And one of the criteria of a rezone application has to look at, and again, it ties back to impacts on surrounding land. So impacts on surrounding land will be consistent with the specific goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, specifically Goal 1. LUBA found that the findings that the increase from 24 to 71 dwellings, again, 24 dwellings is what may be permissible under the current zoning with a combination of partitions. The increase from 24 to 71 wasn't, again, it just relying simply on the distance of the subject property and surrounding lands wasn't quite enough, essentially, to show that there won't be, that essentially they'll be preserving and maintaining ag lands in the agricultural industry. So this, the applicant talked about looking again back sort of to that impact test, looking at ensuring farm practices will be able to be continued, assures that the lands and the industry will be preserved. So again, that was the thought pattern of how the applicant approached this issue area. So again, assuming that it's not going to preclude farm practices, in essence, will ensure that the lands are preserved. It's not going to render them inoperable, for example. And so that's how the applicant approached analyzing this issue. And that's kind of step one, is how the board wants to evaluate this issue area. And then step two, we'll get into some of the related issues we talked about earlier about water, wastewater, and traffic. Opposition didn't quite weigh in on how to interpret goal one, but again, did, generally speaking, think that water, wastewater, traffic impacts would occur, and therefore the application should be denied. So the question for the board is, does the board concur with the applicant's approach to analyze compliance with Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan Goal 1 as it relates to the zone change criteria in Deschutes County Code 1836020? If yes, the board can continue moving to the next issue area. If no, how would the board want to interpret compliance with the above provision?
Okay, so we're talking about an additional 47 homes, but the really excellent news about wastewater is the fact that there are now septic systems which may be available for this project when it does happen, that are 95% effective, a lot higher than what we were dealing with. And they actually felt like in their analysis from the old systems, the ATT systems, that they were good, but we have even better products hopefully available in the near future. So I would think that wastewater, we would definitely be covered.
Are water, wastewater, and traffic the only ways that we are allowed to think about goal one?
So
about
those,
what goal one means?
Yeah, so though certainly there possibly could be more of an expansive view, but those were the issues that LUBA identified in the remand application specifically.
I mean, impacts on surrounding land use. You can think a lot more broadly. I mean, I can think a lot more broadly on that. I mean, what I mentioned earlier, that at the point where if you doesn't mean anything to people who are thinking about purchasing land, and people are buying EFU zoned land for its speculative development value, not for its use as agricultural land. I mean, I don't think, I don't think that we would see people paying the price that was paid for this property less than 10 years ago, if the intent was to use it for agricultural land. So I think that is profoundly impactful to surrounding agricultural lands, because it means that suddenly the market value of those lands is way higher, and continuing to conduct agriculture on the surrounding lands is way more tenuous. So that's an impact on surrounding adjacent lands, agricultural lands, that I think would be worthwhile to consider in all of this. That's not a water, wastewater, or traffic consideration. But, is that not part of the, is that not something that we can consider in relation to goal one?
Yeah, and I think certainly for future applications, possibly, but I think this particular remand issue area is only looking at those specific areas.
And
So
on the
remember,
basis of water, which
Yeah.
already, I would still say no.
it comes to remind me that we tried to do a non-prime farmland effort. We've talked about if it should be open space. Maybe that's a new designation, and this runs right into that same situation. State land use system, one size fits all. The answer is this. We can't vary. And now people are scared to even open it up because there's such high consequences. And this puts us in this spot. Because we've tried to work around this, but oh no, we're not going to have that discussion. So, but I support that the surrounding land uses are not affected for their agricultural value. So, yeah, I guess a statement here, and then we'll go to the next step. So I'm just looking yeses continuing on this one.
Yeah, and I think again, this primary decision point is looking at ensuring that farm practices on adjacent and nearby lands can continue. And again, we talked earlier about the board voted that, you know, the water, wastewater traffic wouldn't prevent or preclude farm uses from occurring.
Existing farm uses.
Correct. Yep.
That's
Exactly.
That's kind of the concept, yeah, right?
And I live right next to a hay ranch, and they're baling their hay like in the middle of whenever the best time is for them.
Right.
Yes, and I totally appreciate that. It's I believe we're all in this together. So
I support, as I say, we haven't seen the final decision on this, but there's proposals for the applicant that have been provided that will be put in place.
so I'd say yes also.
Thank you, commissioners. And then we'll move on. So again, we sort of, the last issue area sort of touched on this. We were talking about, you know, how to interpret that goal 1. This one goes back to, again, the specific water, wastewater traffic, again, as it relates to Deschutes County Comp Plan Goal 1, which is to preserve and maintain agricultural lands and the agricultural industry, which was a little bit different than the other issue area that we touched on. Again, going back to the water issues we talked about, the applicant's consultant asserts that, there's not going to be a measurable impact or prevention of farm practices from occurring. We talked about traffic, and then, the applicant is proposing those conditions of approval related to nuisance and trespass, and then proposing to limit the development to a maximum of 71 dwellings. Opposition, some of the opposition looked at, there were concerns with wastewater from septic drain fields flowing down to the groundwater, and again, sewage drainage affecting nearby farm practices. And so again, the question for the board is, considering the proposed conditions of approval, will the impacts of the zone change on surrounding land use be consistent with Goal 1 to preserve and maintain agricultural lands, considering water, wastewater, and traffic impacts? If yes, the board can continue reviewing the applications and move to approve the application. If no, the board must deny the application.
I would like to read the conclusion from Brian Rapp's statement from July 22nd. The potential for adverse impacts to groundwater quality from residential septic systems at this site is low. And as I just said, the mechanisms are even getting better. And then, he continues on, use of the site for any profitable commercial farm use, including grazing or a feedlot, is impractical. If you have any questions, call him. So anyway, I appreciate those comments that he made. That was his conclusion.
So I support proceeding, so I'll say yes here, and then as I say, this will be in the decision, the words that really document that situation.
So then we go, okay, I say yes also.
I still have concerns about water, but impacts to wastewater quality, as long as septic systems are properly installed and maintained, I'm not too concerned about that.
Just jumping back again, I don't want to be redundant, but just wanting to make sure we're comprehensive with the board's decision. Page
4.
Page 4. Yep, exactly. Again, this is tying back to the necessary to permit farm practices. And so again, the question is retention of the property's agricultural designation necessary to permit farm practices on adjacent or nearby lands?
So yeah, I do not see this impacting the opportunity to permit adjacent or nearby lands.
We talked about water, we talked about wastewater, we talked about traffic. Water is my primary concern. I would like to see conditions that are more conservative of our water resources before I would say that I didn't think this was an impact on adjacent farmlands or nearby farmlands.
And I would say no, that we could proceed.
Thank you, commissioners. So I've got tallied up all of the feedback, and it's so on all these issue areas, there's a majority in support of the application. And so unless, again, there's any further questions or process steps, the next step for staff would be to work with the applicant and legal counsel to craft the draft decision and return to the commissioners with that document and the ordinance for a review of that decision. We'll go through edits if there are any, and then prepare for first and second reading.
So when are you going to have to speak with the applicant to see when you might be able to do that?
Yeah, we don't have a date set yet. I think we probably want, early October, we want to be here for first reading, because then second reading has to be 2 weeks later.
Right.
So we just are tracking that October 24th date.
So we'll definitely need to do this in September.
Quickly. Yep.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Anything
and
else from
that's
us?
it for me, unless, anyone had questions, but
So just acknowledging, closing the loop, I did go to Salem and sat in front of the LCDC and asked them not to appeal this or wanted to learn more. Staff put it in front of the commission, our statewide land use commission. They all nodded yes, and they put an appeal in for this decision that we put together. And it has statewide significance. Commissioner Chang, you mentioned the scale of it. As I say, there's the vision of all the urban growth boundary expansion needs for the city of Bend and the resource land getting rezoned. We've got a long history of properties that haven't been farmed for a profit. So my point, I'm just acknowledging the state's in a pickle here. They really are. This is our statewide land use system, and now we're being put in a really tight spot on a reasonable application that's even willing to negotiate. So commentary.
Yeah, thank you for those negotiating factors, cutting back to the quarter acre. I really, I appreciate that. And if you can add something about what they said about the junipers, because I do believe there is going to be a correlation between junipers and the impacts on the community. 710 acres with a few junipers gone will be beneficial, more than a few.
I thought we were supposed to hold our broader policy comments until after the quasi-judicial process was completed. But since you wanted to chime in there, I would just say that talking about rezones, land use constraints on housing adjacent to the urban growth boundary is entirely different than talking about this rezone application out in the far distant unincorporated county.
And I'm just so thankful that whatever happened, and I get to live on a rezone. I don't know when it was done, but thank you. Because I love where I live, and I love living next to a major hay ranch. They're wonderful people, and they work really hard. So thank you. Thanks, Hallie. Thanks for all that you've done on this. And I know we'll see you soon.
Can I just, Chair, if I can just ask a question, just for legal, do you want a vote on the total remand as opposed, you have decisions
Yeah,
on
so
each
this-
area. Do you want a final vote pending the final written decision today? And I'm seeing,
And that was our, recommended.
Okay.
I would recommend a formal motion approving the application.
So if there's support, so I'll move to close deliberations and a motion to approve, direct staff to return with a draft decision.
Do you have to be specific, of the 710 properties? Do you have to add that to the motion?
For the topic being discussed.
Okay, all right. Is there a second?
For me.
I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang, and the chair votes yes.
Well, and thank you for that concluding, because sometimes the media asks us afterwards, did you approve it or deny it? Well, we had a big, long discussion and yeah. Been approved.
Okay, great.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right, we'll see you in maybe 2 weeks. Something like that?
Perhaps. Yeah.
Perhaps.
We'll work on it. Yeah.
Okay, I know, because this month is flying by. All right. So now do we want to take a recess and come back for the executive or do it now? Your call. What do you want to do, guys?
How big of an item is it?
It said it was 10 minutes.
It should be relatively short. It's just an updated briefing on an item.
Do we
Okay.
want-
Yeah,
But
10 minutes.
we
15
haven't done
minutes.
other items yet.
Yeah, look at it.
Other items? Okay, other items then.
I just wanted to report back from the Public Health Advisory Board meeting yesterday. We had an epidemiologist presentation on changes in Oregon's drug overdose mortality situation. So Matt Christensen from our public health department reviewed both national, state, and local overdose and overdose death statistics with us. One of the significant things to know is that based on medical examiner records for the year, real time, we know that there have been 23 overdose deaths in Deschutes County so far this year. So almost to the same level that we were at in 2023, which in 2023, there were 24 overdose deaths. In 2024, so far, there have been 23 overdose deaths. So that doesn't sound like good news, but there was actually a significant amount of good news in the information that Matt shared with us. We have seen drug overdose visits to the emergency department declining steadily since August of 2023. So, basically he said we saw a peak, over the course of many years in August 2023, and we've had a significant decline in ED visits for opioid overdose, both at the state level and at the local level in the last year. We've also seen, fentanyl has become, one of our most important, one of the most important drugs in terms of overdose mortalities and emergency department visits. But that is, we saw a surge in use and kind of presence in overdose deaths between 2018 and 2023. Literally in 2018, fentanyl was present in the body in 22% of overdose deaths. In 2023, fentanyl was present in the body in 77% of overdose deaths. So fentanyl has been the driver. But we are also seeing a slowdown on that front as well. Another piece of what might be good news is that we are doing it essentially at this point. Our overdose mortality rate per 100,000 people is on the lower end for counties in the state of Oregon. So that's good news for us, bad news for a whole lot of other counties. There are 5 counties that are in the the most alarming levels of concern for, across the nation. They were in the 95th percentile in terms of overdose deaths per 100,000 people. Those are Jackson, Josephine, Curry, Multnomah, and Lane. So we're doing a lot better. Those counties have 4, 5, 6 times the deaths per 100,000 people per year that we're having. So that's, again, maybe good news for us, bad news for them. But it was particularly interesting just to hear that we are seeing emergency department visits dramatically decreased, and we expect to see, even though we've had in Deschutes County almost as many deaths this year so far as last year, we would expect to see the decline in overdose incidents playing out in reduced deaths, over time. And that the presentation was very interesting. I would encourage us to, ask Dr. Christensen to come and give the presentation directly to us. Took about 25, 30 minutes for him to get through his slides for the Public Health Advisory Board.
Brenda, could you put that on the list of somebody to bring in? I had also asked for feedback on all the millions we spent on childcare, and I know we're going to get a presentation on that too. So, great. Commissioner DeBonne, do you have anything?
Next week is going to be the ODOT transportation, or not ODOT's, but the Transportation Committee from the legislature coming through. Chris Doty had provided some proposed testimony. I don't know if he was wanting us to respond to it today or early next week. The two big points are just inflate. Oh yeah, there's Chris right there. There you go. I brought it. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Go ahead, take it from there.
I'd love to kind of walk you through the letter that I sent you. Again, as Commissioner DeBonne mentioned, the Joint Committee's rolling into town on a tour. They've been touring most of Oregon kind of through the summer. What they do is they hold a tour in the morning with kind of local transportation officials like myself and others to take a look at the work that's being done. Then they have more of a formal invitation roundtable with local leaders, electeds and whatnot. And then in the evening, they have a kind of an open house hearing to take testimony from the public. So they'll be here next Thursday, the 12th. And it's an opportunity for us to submit written testimony as well. And most counties and officials have been doing that. The AOC has been encouraging counties to submit testimony. In the letter you have, I'm really just hitting on 2 points. This committee's been all over the state. They're hearing lots of things, but I really want to drive home a couple things important to us. One is just the fact that, since House Bill 2017 was passed in 2017, inflation has just been incredible in terms of the buying power of our state highway fund revenue, and how little we're able to buy of that prior increase. As noted in this letter, 44% increase in construction cost over that time frame is somewhat completely eroded, the 33% increase in the fuel tax that was implemented back then. So really just want to drive home, the fact that what we thought was this transportation funding package, it was going to really last a long time in 2017, has been kind of taken out by the realities of inflation. The second thing that I want to drive home in this letter is really the importance of that 50-30-20 split of state highway fund revenues, 50% with the state, 30% with counties, 20% with cities. And really, further drive home the fact that whereas cities have a variety of different tools to generate local transportation funding, counties do not, or at least practical tools. And we are basically tied at the hip with ODOT as it pertains to increases in the state highway fund and us getting our formulaic share of that. There's been some discussion legislatively to revisit that 50-30-20 formula in light of the fact that ODOT has these well advertised and well publicized operations and maintenance deficits, and then severe difficulty in delivering the capital projects especially in the I-5, I-205 corridors in the Portland area that were identified as projects in House Bill 2017. But I just gonna really want to drive home the fact that we are so dependent on that 30% that it would be a disservice to not continue that formula distribution with that. So that board, that's the two kind of primary points that you'd be signing on to in this letter. Again, with the understanding they've been all over the state, they've heard a lot from everybody, and trying to keep it simple and brief to those 2 points.
Thank you, Chris. Those seem to be the important points that we talked about at COAC last Thursday. So I think it's important that we get our name on this letter. And yeah, we need to keep that 30% for the county. And hopefully they'll start charging EVs a proper licensing fee that they haven't done to date.
Yeah, no, I'm confident that.
Sorry, Commissioner DeBonne.
$250 a year I'm not paying right now is what I determined with my 20,000 miles generally annually. It's about, and if it's 40 cents a gallon, it's about $250 I'm not paying.
So you said you want to pay that?
It would be appropriate to pay that amount of money.
Because
and
the roads
state hasn't required it.
Because your car actually weighs more, and yes.
Oh, so you want me to pay more now?
No, I'm just saying, when they look at what electric cars weigh, there's damage from weight, isn't there, Chris? Yes.
That's part of the conversation.
Wear and tear on the road.
All right. So do we need a motion for
I
this?
did see that letter and I did provide a printed copy. Commissioner Chang, have you seen it?
I've seen it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So can we have a motion to sign this letter?
I'll move approval of the letter drafted by Chris Doty to provide to the Joint Committee on Transportation.
and I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Now,
Board.
if I could ask, so Chris is going to provide testimony to the Joint Committee. I mean, is this our official, this is what Deschutes County is saying? Are we agreeing to that right now, or are we just agreeing to sign on to this letter?
No, I think we have to keep our ask pretty simple. They're saying all kinds of things like they don't have money, they want to close down like the sisters ODOT facility. And I'm like, don't you want to keep facilities close to the mountain? So there's all kinds of things that are happening out there. And unfortunately, we did lose Robert Townsend will be leaving ODOT, and he has been my go-to person since 2019. I wish him all the best. And the good news is he'll still be part of our COAC group moving over to COIC.
And
So
just for
Commissioner
the record,
Chang, pardon me. I support these two topics, but as I say, if I end up testifying or talking to legislators, I'll probably talk about the EV registration fees and, ask about bicycle registration possibly. In fact, Chris, I want to ask you about that. Is bicycle registration ever come up at the state level?
it's, in House Bill 2017, there was provision to actually implement a tax or a fee on certain bicycles that have purchased over a certain amount. That's the first time.
$300, I think.
Yeah, it's the first time that there'd been a program of that nature. That's always, someone is always bringing that up, certainly, especially as more multi-use paths and everything are part of what the state intends to construct. Joint Committee on Transportation is probably looked to as the committee that will kind of draft that legislative transportation funding package. And so they're on the front line of producing something that will ultimately work its way through the legislative process. And so this roundtable and then the public open house meeting after that, just an opportunity to have conversations with local folks on what needs exist. They'll certainly hear from us in that roundtable because that's invitation only, and that'll be specific to local governments and other stakeholders. But then they'll also hear from the public in the evening. So ultimately, what we have to say, they'll take in consideration as they look to put that funding package, as they look to draft it for consideration by the legislature in 2025.
Thank you for all that, Chris. I mean, I will not be here that day because I will be in Washington, D.C. advocating for us to get continued PILT and SRS payments totaling over $4 million a year for Deschutes County, most of which we use for our roads program. So I just want to make sure that we have agreed upon key messages from the county that are going to be delivered in a formal way to the Joint Committee on Transportation. Anything beyond that you want to say, that's fine. But, I would like to confirm that the content of this letter is going to be kind of the official first priority message of Deschutes County. And then I wanted to understand who was going to be delivering that.
So I'll be attending, it looks like the roundtable. I've got other things that evening, so I won't stay, either I'll stay for the beginning or maybe not even be able to attend the public hearing section at the end of the day. But yeah, this letter will be provided in its context, and those will be the two main bullet points.
And please don't let them close Sister's office, because for the keeping the past open, I just think, oh my gosh, that doesn't make any sense at all.
We just saw a letter from Sun River Owners Association asking to get serious about funding winter maintenance on 97. So
Oh,
it's
yes.
kind of a seasonal letter because of last year's situation, but that just came out from James Lewis.
Definitely. So yes, seasonal funding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you, Board.
Chris.
That's all I had.
That's all. And I did mention Robert Townsend leaving, so unfortunately. All right, anything else? Are we in a position that we can?
We'll go ahead and just plan on bringing the e-session item back at another time.
Oh, okay.
We actually, it's not time sensitive, so
Okay.
in the length of today's meeting, we'll just reschedule it and bring it back at another time.
Oh, all right.
I thought you said it was going to be quick.
So, we'll just bring it back at another time.
It's okay. It's all right then. All right. So therefore, our next meeting is going to be, is it next Monday? Do we have a meeting on Monday?
The board is not meeting on the 9th due to AOC meetings. So the next
Yes.
meeting will be a week from today.
On September 11th. Okay. Great. All right. So we are adjourning until September 11th.
And then Commissioner Chang, you won't be here for that? Or?
No, he's
Won't
going to
be
be.
here in person. If
He'll be in
if
DC.
there's a substantive agenda, I can probably zoom
Okay.
in.
Okay.
Right.
Very good.